Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Political Pigpen, episode 36, looking back on the Capitol riots. That's not a fantastic title for this stream, but it gets the job done. It conveys what we're going to be discussing, more or less. It is, as we all know, the second anniversary of the January 6th, I don't know what you call them, riots.
A
Some people call them
day that will live in infamy.
No, I know some people have called it like insurrection, a coup, riots, revolution, just all these
Riot.
things. Whatever,
The clo-
whatever it was, whatever January 6th, 2020, 2021 was, um, going to be looking back and reflecting upon the consequences of that because everybody still talks about it now, and it's frankly kind of annoying. But I guess it does, whether we like it or not, have some long-term consequences. There's also the January 6th Inquisition in Congress right now going on. And then in addition to that, so we're just going to be discussing that. It's going to be a shorter stream. I know I say that all the time, and I know I say that all the time too. But I'm really hoping that is going to be the case this time. Towards the end, going to be going and discussing the clusterfuck that is the House of Representatives right now. Kevin McCarthy, what was it, 7 times he was already like denied the vote for speaker. I don't know. I haven't really been following it super closely, but all I know is that it's definitely funny. Or what I do know. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and do introductions. As always, we will go left to right and then left to right again when we get to the bottom. Unfortunately, Darth Kilhoun was unable to make it tonight. His grandmother is he told me they don't know how much longer she has left, so he's spending time with her. So George is filling in as my co-host tonight. I know I didn't tell you that beforehand, but you got to remember George. So, speaking of George, go ahead and introduce yourself to those who might not know you.
Yeah, I'm George. I'm a far-right political commentator. That's it.
That's it? Aiden Stone, how are you doing this evening?
Hey, how's it going? I'm Aiden Stone, MAGA communist, 100% Stalinist, 100% Maoist, here to talk about January 6th.
Based.
Yeah.
And Jay Burden, this is your first time on, not just on the Political Pigpen, but on my channel as well. I know I was on your channel the other night to discuss various historical cyclical theories of history and all that, and I had a lot of fun with you there. And I was like, you know what, I'll invite you on as well. You're a pretty insightful guy. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on. Out of all the far right interview podcasts, I certainly am one of them. I host roughly 2 to 3 hour-long interviews a week over on the Jay Burden Show, which you can find on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and you won't hear much of me there. I generally try to let my guests shine, but I do have my own opinions, and hopefully I can offer at least some of those tonight.
All right, thank you so much. Damnation, how are you doing? I think the last time you were on was the Politics of Middle Earth stream.
Yeah, one of them. I'm Damnation 3. I am the Michael Malice type right-wing anarchist of this group that's also considered quote-unquote far-right because, government sucks, guns are cool, and the closest thing January 6th was basically a fucking riot by a bunch of retards and Fed PSYOP motherfuckers. So, yeah.
And finally, last but not least, Net7.
Hey guys, neoconservative activist / streamer. Just here to tell my thoughts on January 6th and yeah, all that fun jazz. Check out my contact on RDF capital NET7 at Twitter. You can find my link tree right there and see what I'm all about. Neocon action, V for victory.
All right. Again, thank you everybody for taking your time to come on this evening. I say we just get right down to it. We're going to go in another circle right now. Share our opinions on. Everybody remembers what it was like that day. Back to January 6th, the year of our Lord, 2021. Three Kings Day, the Epiphany. Christmas is officially over, and we all turn on the news. And what do we see? We see a bunch of boomers trying to storm the Capitol building. Yep. Basically, that's what it was. It was, I mean, I think what we want to do is we're going to each go around and say what our initial thoughts were as we were watching it unfold. I remember I was on my computer that evening, or not that evening, it was that morning. And I just get a text from my colleague and he says, "Hey, are you watching this Capitol shit? It's fucking hilarious." And so I turn it on and I start watching the footage and I just start laughing my ass off. And then I go into work. And so I start telling my supervisor about it. And even she's like a Gen Xer. And I was telling her about it and she was like, yeah, it's kind of sad, but it's also kind of funny too. So I just thought it was really silly. Like, I don't know. I'm going to give more of my thoughts as the evening goes on because I do have some strong opinions regarding it. Not so much about the riot itself, but about how people discuss it and how it is characterized. But again, we'll get onto that next. So, George, where were you, and what was your initial reaction to witnessing all the witnessing, as you call it, Chudsmas? I know that's what you call
yes, it was Chudsmas. The Russians are celebrating Christmas now, and a week before or 2 weeks before, normal Christians were celebrating regular Christmas. And but now we have a new holiday. It's Chudsmas. Instead of putting lights on a Christmas tree, we're putting lights on the state capitol in one sense of the word, lights. Yeah, it was euphoric.
Instead of Christmas trees, it's gallows.
Yeah, instead of Christmas trees, it's the Capitol. But yeah, I was pretty euphoric just because I get excited whenever there's death and violence. Usually, yeah, kind of. Which I used to think that's messed up, but that's like a normal human reaction. And if you think, oh, George, but these are real people, George, these totally aren't George, human life has inherent value. It's not like most of humanity are insects or anything like that. But no, it was pretty entertaining. And yeah, my parents, my friends, I just got my phone blew up. It was my phone blew up like I was the popular girl at high school. And they're all saying, "George, are you watching the TV? It's a little terrorist attack, George." Anyway, yeah, pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I think pretty much most people, at least I feel like, especially
most
it's
normal
the
people,
millennials.
Most normal people thought it was well. Actually, most normal people thought it was crazy shit. But I don't know, insects who are slaves to the government or the civil religion. They're trying to make this as big as 9/11. I remember. Do you guys know the Star Trek show Picard?
Yes.
I guess later on. I guess I'll just put this in and we can talk about the cultural depictions of it because even though it's been 2 years since this thing, there have already been cultural depictions of J621, and Star Trek Picard puts this on the same level as the Holocaust and 9/11.
I mean,
think about that.
That sounds like satire. That sounds like something that would be in a satire movie. Oh my god, treating it.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. If we were in a writing room, we were trying to make conservative, a conservative. We were the Babylon Bee and trying to make what would libtards think is a horrible event. We put that in there, but Star Trek Picard does it unironically. So I guess for our enemies, it's sort of a unifying event because the dirty people, they got into this sacred place where looking at history, Congress is not a sacred place. 19th century people were almost beaten to death. Like,
oh yeah, no, it was, what was it, 1793? I forget the two congressmen, but one of them almost beat the other one to death with a cane. Like, I would have liked to be there.
On the floor, if I remember correctly. On the floor of the fucking house. It was great.
Yeah. Anyway, Aiden Stone. Same question for you.
Yeah, I think January 6th was a very weak attempt at a Reichstag fire, and I believe it's going to backfire if it hasn't already, because I think this like liberal Democrat machine has really lives in a bubble and has overestimated how much people like them and like care about seeing them huddled under chairs and shit. Some people do for sure, and those people get amplified. But for most people, I don't think that's how they felt. But I definitely think it was allowed to happen, and the sort of Democrat and Rhino machine was hoping to use this as another 9/11, because 9/11 is pretty old at this point. Kind of needs something new to get people scared again, so they can push through. I mean, they expanded the Capitol Police budget by a lot. Who's like spying on Congress people now, and but I think it was pretty much a failure, and I think they may have accidentally created a bunch of martyrs. All these people who are in jail right now in violation of the Sixth Amendment for like trespassing, which, I mean, they're political prisoners, essentially, the January 6th prisoners. And I think a lot of people believe that, but are afraid to talk about it because they don't want to get their accounts banned. And I think the legacy of January 6th is sort of yet to be fully realized, but I don't think it's exactly what was intended. I mean, it seems to have been memory hold, but on the day, the cops were opening the barricades and letting people in. So clearly this was not an unexpected happenstance for them.
I just want to say I have heard that. Is that actually confirmed true, or is that something YouTube will find controversial?
Someone let them in. There were
I
magnetic.
saw the video on the day, so
Yeah.
unless that video was faked.
There was a magnetic door that had a magnetic seal that they didn't break, and you see somebody go towards where the magnetic button is and hit it. Supposedly.
Yeah.
Okay.
In general, if the government wanted to keep them out, they could have. Because George is talking about how it was this, it's fun violence, but I don't think it was a particularly violent day. I mean, they pretty much just walked in there, staying between the velvet ropes, like they're taking a tour. And, liberals will say, oh, it's like 9/11, it's like the Holocaust, beyond parody as always. It's ridiculous. No, liberals want their own 9/11. They're jealous of all the powers that the Bush administration got after 9/11. They want that for themselves, and that's what I believe January 6th was.
Okay, fair enough. Anyway, what about you, Jay Borden?
So I was in a weird spot on January 6th. I was in school at the time, and I had just met with a friend who had been in from Romania, who had gotten COVID bad. And so at this time, right, I was still in university and I was staying with my elderly grandparents. And so I was like, all right, like I got to get out of the house. Where can I stay? And obviously no one wanted to welcome me into the house as a potential typhoid Mary. So I got stuck in the barn at one of my good friend's farms. So sitting in a barn, and I was watching Gods of Egypt because it was the only thing they had on DVD.
A shit movie.
It was a shit movie. And then I'm on my phone and I'm like, wait,
January 6th.
what the hell's going on? And, understandably, I wasn't exactly paying attention to the movie. And so I kind of watched the whole thing happen, over Twitter. And so
January 6th is probably more Oscar worthy than Gods of Egypt.
Oh, 100%. It's way more entertaining. But so I'll say, I think that there are a variety of narratives on it. So I think that it's right to kind of address the domestic war on terror angle of it. And there was this omnibus bill that passed. It was massive. It was a couple hundred pages that passed within a few days afterwards, which if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember the name of the bill, but it increased and legitimized a lot of security practices within U.S. borders, right? And what I think that this moment is I think that it kind of solidified some narratives and shattered others. And I don't mean to say that this is either true or false, but it provided enough of an argument to set certain things in motion. I think for Blue America, it was finally the confirmation that Trump was Orange Hitler. This was his aborted attempt to turn the country into The Handmaid's Tale. And I think that it provided finally the real justification. There was going to be a justification no matter what for impeaching him, but I think that it was really the thing that was finally there for, we can go get him. I think that in addition, it was also something that made Trump unapproachable for a certain type of kind of like moderate American voter. The kind of person who isn't particularly Republican or particularly Democrat. They're the kind of person who's sensitive to it was insurrection. He tried to take over the country, regardless if that's true or not. I think for us on the radical right, it firmly broke down the narrative of Trump being an effective political actor. January 6th was, if it was an attempt to seize power, it was a really bad one. It was really lame. It wasn't particularly effective. It wasn't particularly well organized, not only in the run up to it, but afterwards, right? Like Trump ran away. And not only did Trump run away, and I say this as someone who didn't vote for Trump, I'm not a Trump guy, but it showed that Trump was unable to make good on the primary promise of politics, right? And that promise is, you put me in charge and I'll protect you. I'll see to your influence, or I'll see to your interests. And he showed in that moment that he couldn't do it. He couldn't look out for his people who were willing to go to bat for him, when they thought that he had been cheated. And so to me, right, I think that it was a classic case of essentially the right, looking for the biggest rake they could and then jumping on it. And I think that it showed, not to necessarily say that the MAGA movement is broken, but that Trump was not a real serious political actor. And I think that for Blue America, it basically showed that they were right the whole time. And so I guess my summation of it, I kind of look at the whole thing as a little bit kind of pathetic and embarrassing. It was the moment boomers found out that the rules weren't really fair. That the right isn't allowed to protest like the left is.
You see, that's exactly why I call. So I unironically refer to January 6th as the Boomer Hall Putsch. Basically, I mean, that's basically what it was. It was just a bunch of boomers storming. Like it was like a cringier version of the Beer Hall Putsch, but it was with boomers. So like that's kind of
and I think that
cheek name I give with me and Al, because I kind of joke about that sometimes.
Well, and that's a good term for it. And I'm wrapping this up. I'm not trying to suck up all the air in the room, but to me, it really put Trump's character to test. It put his will to power to test. And to be honest, at least from my perspective, it showed him for what he truly was. It showed him to be not particularly effective. It showed him to be not necessarily willing to, quote unquote, cross the Rubicon. And fair enough, right? I'm glad that, I'm glad that I didn't get hurt. I'm glad that none of my friends got hurt, but I feel really sorry for the people who did, get their lives ruined because of this. A lot of people have lost a lot of money, have lost a lot of their lives, have lost, their status as free people, essentially to someone who couldn't make good on the promises he made them. And that's my take on it.
Okay. I agree with a significant degree of what you just said. But I won't go into detail on that specifically, but Damnation needs to talk now. So Damnation, same question.
with January 6th, my initial thought process, I don't remember exactly where I was at. I was probably in the same room I am right now after work, watching all of this shit go down. And just having a general, that's hilarious kind of feel about it. Because I'm like, when you see all the pictures, and there's one image that specifically sticks in my mind, right? And it's the one where all of these politicians are sitting huddled on the congressional floor behind their desks, right? And the first thought I had when I saw that picture is, why are these people afraid of meeting their constituents, right? Because that's like the first question I had. And you would think that if these people were doing a good job, they would welcome them in with open arms and say, "Hey, how are you? My name is blah, blah, blah. I represent your district. What are some of your concerns?" Right? But no, they're huddled behind their fucking security, deathly, quote unquote, deathly afraid of these violent insurrectionists, right? And it left me with this general distaste in my mouth for all federal politicians, and it truly drove home the point that all of these people are fucking swamp creatures and do not deserve the power that the people have supposedly given them, allegedly given them, right? And and that's just kind of spiraled out into my current stance on politics as a whole, which is more along the lines of like the Michael Malice types of like democracy has fucking failed. We need to start looking at alternatives to an overarching federal state and going more towards a localized style of stuff and like that and maximizing the freedoms of the individual in that regard. So like that's just like my general thoughts on the whole January 6th thing. I thought it was a fucking joke. Thought it was it was a really bad joke. And yeah.
It's peak clown world. That
Oh,
is,
dude, it was, yeah.
I mean, it's basically at this point, it's like, okay, we might as well. I mean, this country's going down the shitter. We might as well enjoy it. I mean, that's pretty much been my mindset for the past ever since Trump Hillary 2016, basically. But I know I will say that it still confuses me, like what was going through the rioters' heads that day. It's like it's almost as if they thought it was a video game. It's like, okay, what we need to do, we need to storm the Capitol. We need to like take over the, I don't know, the rotunda, and or not the rotunda, but the chambers, whatever. And then take this stuff, steal this stuff, take trinkets, memorabilia. And we win once we take the House chamber. There we go. Game one. It's like that was their mindset, more or less.
Well, and that's
it was they didn't it feels like they didn't understand that there were going to be consequences, and that's what really, like, I don't know, that's really what confuses me. I mean, honestly, I was half expecting. I think it would be funny if they did like a National Treasure 3 where Nicolas Cage has to steal Nancy Pelosi's laptop to find navigational charts that will lead to Hyperborea or something.
That's fantastic. I'm on board with that. Let's go.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I'm gonna storm the Capitol building. No, but
it's never
either
been
way,
done
yeah.
before. Oh wait, yeah, it has.
No, he was the mastermind behind January 6th.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah. Anyway,
gotcha.
Net 7.
Well, I think we should all recognize that January 6th was a riot. It was a serious event. And I do want to thank, obviously, the officers who tried to hold the line and were trying to stop these, rioters from essentially reaching into the Capitol.
They opened the gates for them.
Attack people. That's disputed. That's not true. There were plenty of officers who were assaulted, who were beaten, officers who, literally, suffered, concussions and all sorts of injuries. And it's very disappointing that, that happened, and it should never have happened. And I'm obviously happy that people who were involved with that are facing criminal charges. The reality is that it's, that what happened there was unacceptable. And, I kind of agree with what Lindsey Graham was saying, what was going on. He was telling some of the police officers, why aren't you shooting these people? The fact of the matter is, if you breach into a government building like that and you've been told to leave and you're assaulting police officers, at that point, all bets are off, in my opinion. You should be shooting those people in that, who are trying to essentially grab a hold of people and assault them and potentially kill them. I mean, you have people screaming, "Hang Mike Pence." I think we can kind of, and literally attacking police officers, I think we can kind of assume that their intent is not good. The fact of the matter is, I mean, the violence that occurred on January 6th, was unacceptable. The same thing in which happened, throughout the country with the George Floyd riots, people burning down police buildings, trying to burn down government buildings, assaulting police officers, assaulting random citizens. That both those acts of violence were unacceptable. And the reality is that people on the right should obviously had good reason to condemn the George Floyd riots, because many of them were violent and they were absolutely unacceptable. But we should also condemn the January 6th riots too, because the reality is that the Republican Party is a party of law and order. And, obviously, if you want to protest, you can protest peacefully, but don't go and attack police officers and try to then storm the government building because you have questions about the 2020 election. Make your voice heard, but don't, go and do stuff like that. So those are my thoughts.
I mean, I do find it interesting. So I don't necessarily agree with that they should have been shot. However, I do think it is interesting. Like, you're making the connection between the George Floyd riots and the Capitol riot. And I'm going to use that to segue into a point I was going to make anyway. First of all, regarding the police, I find it's kind of funny where whenever the police helps one side, they praise the police and then they condemn the police. And the opposite, it's like you had like the left who was like they were like, "Oh, ACAB, all cops are bastards," after the George Floyd incident, and then that flips during January 6th because the rioters are salty that the cops were pepper spraying them, and it just goes to show that there's really like little like principle in supporting these institutions. Like, people will only support these institutions like on a fair weather basis, whether it helps their narrative or not, or whether they feel like they are helping them advance their goals. So that's the first point I was going to make. And the second point is, yes, so you are drawing the connection between the riot at the Capitol and the riots in the summer of 2020 following George Floyd's death. And on that note, this is the one thing that really bothered me, though, is I would actually say that the riots following the death of George Floyd were exponentially worse than the storming of the Capitol. And the reason I say this, I mean, yes, from a symbolic perspective, the storming of the Capitol was far worse. I guess just from a metaphysically speaking, I'd say it is a much more severe incident. However, when you really boil down to it, like on a purely practical level, on a fundamentally human level, the riots in the summer of 2020 were significantly worse because that was damage to private property. Businesses were being destroyed. Countless people still have not recovered from it. People lost their entire livelihoods because you had these formless mobs out in the street who just wanted to like burn everything down, both literally and metaphorically. And it's almost an insult to those people who lost their businesses, who lost their livelihoods during those riots, to say that January 6th is like the worst and most violent thing that has ever happened. It's like, okay, even if there was damage done to the Capitol building, like damage done to federal property, the government has enough money to fix it. The government can just like re-renovate something like that. I know that's just like a dumb singular example, but it's true. I mean, the government has the capacity to recover, but individual middle class business owners do not. That's the difference, and that is why the riots in the summer of 2020 were significantly worse on a practical level.
Well, I think that what it really showed is kind of the priorities of the people in power, right? It doesn't matter, within reason, how much of your stuff mobs destroy. What matters is when a mob enters kind of one of the holy temples of our state religion, right? And so whereas blocks and blocks of Kenosha or Milwaukee, or Atlanta could have been destroyed, harmed, smashed up, well, we'll send in some force there. But if you come into one of our areas, which, in this case is the capital, then we will not only, respond in force, but we will essentially hunt these people to the end of the earth. It will be politicized. It will be turned into essentially a show trial. And my point in this is not to say like, oh, it's unfair, but it should be a learning moment. Like you see, well, this is what these people's priority are. This is what the people in power want. And really, like they don't particularly, up until the point that it affects them, care about the rest of us. It shouldn't be shocking, right? It's human nature.
Oh, yeah. That is the case. We do have a comment. Crusader says, I feel a lot more sorry for small business owners than I do for politicians cowering in the Capitol building. Yes. And you see that this is the one good thing. I think there was one positive thing that did come out of January 6, 2020 or 2021. And that was, it shows that politicians are actually afraid of us. And when I say us, I mean the American people.
Of the
yeah,
people
I don't mean
that
us
rule
because
them,
I do not condone the riot itself, but it did demonstrate something. It did demonstrate that it's possible to infiltrate their ivory towers. And when I say that, I don't mean the Capitol. I just mean in the abstract sense. Like and it just goes to show like the American people are, because we think of like, oh yeah, the government, big government, it's oppressing us. They're going to it can like overpower the people, whatever. And honestly, I'm not so sure anymore now that I think about it. I feel like theoretically, especially given how many guns that American civilians have, I think an actual legitimate revolution might be more realistic than one might think.
Sure.
So that's a completely different conversation, but I don't know. It just made me,
and one that we might not be able to have on YouTube.
Yes, definitely not. And I'm not supporting that. I'm definitely not supporting that. Definitely, like, yeah. And I'm not just saying that. I don't support revolutions.
So I will say I actually fundamentally disagree with you on that. I think that what this showed is that all of the talk about like 1776 will commence again, like 3%er Alex Jones stuff was pure LARP. Because when there is this like, oh, we have a smoking gun from the perspective of like the MAGA types, right? Like we're gonna take truth to power. We're gonna take over. Well, to be honest, not only was it disorganized, not only was it kind of embarrassing, but to be honest, like if this was their revolution, they didn't act like it. They didn't bring the hardware you would expect. And again, they shouldn't have. That would have been even dumber than what happened. But to me, like that shows me that, at least from my perspective, that all of the talk about revolution and all of the talk about, fighting the state, like no one's actually willing to do it. Everyone just wants to stay.
It is a LARP. I do agree. It is a LARP. I just meant in general, like, I feel like if something were to happen, I feel like it is the American people have more of a chance than I previously thought maybe they would have. I mean, yes, I mean, I'm sure the US military would win in that situation.
Well,
but I'm just saying, I feel like
LARP is based. Fake it till you make it.
There's
says the revolutionary of the stream, Aiden.
Well, Aiden is not the only revolutionary on the stream. You know this.
Me and domination, dude.
Yeah. Damnation. Yeah. We could go into tactics but I don't really want to go into tactics of how to of the U.S. military and shit like that. What I will say about January 6th is, while I agree that it was a LARP at that time, that there was a number of things that happened around that time that basically solidified me to the point where I contemplated, where I basically I was like, okay, this might actually be the time where I have to start to prepare, right? To start getting myself to the point where I have to like start thinking about living in a world without the government, right? And there was another event that happened when the Supreme Court of the United States refused to take up that Texas case that was against Pennsylvania, right? Where they were where Texas was saying that the state of Pennsylvania violated their own election laws, right? And we, as the state of Texas, are petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court, who has primary jurisdiction of situations between the states, right? When there's disputes like that, to settle these things and give us some sort of curing and recompense for our disputes, right? And when I saw that particular instance happen, I was like, well, that's one institution that's just completely supposedly supposed to be for the right wing in this country, based upon the Supreme Court picks that Donald Trump put in, right? That completely abdicated its responsibility to settle that dispute, right? And there was a legitimate concern that wasn't based on a stolen election or election fraud. It was one state who had a grievance against another state because they set their election laws like they have the right to do, and then disregarded those election laws, right?
I just want to say up front, in case YouTube needs clarification, we accept that Joe Biden has won. We are not election deniers.
Yeah, I'm not denying the election, but
I just feel the need to
something
say that
you
for the
can
sake
look
of
for sure. Yeah, no. I'm not denying
The
the
electoral system in the
interpretation.
U.S. is completely legitimate, and there would never be anything. There would never be anything suspicious about that.
Ever.
Ever.
But when you saw that was a legitimate concern between those two states, and the Supreme Court of the United States refused to take up that case, and you had, I think it was Justice Thomas and Justice Alito that said, no, our responsibility is to settle disputes between states exactly like this, right? And we have a responsibility to take the case and issue a decision. And the fucking other cowards that were there, they refuse. If I remember correctly, Justice Roberts' response is we cannot take this case up because they will literally burn the fucking court to the ground if we do this and we issue a decision that one side's unpopular with, right? And it's like, no, your fucking responsibility is to take legitimate concerns like that between the states and resolve them. And when you abdicate your responsibility in that, you destroy the trust that the average U.S. citizen has in these institutions, and we start, and a lot of us start considering, what the fuck do we even have you guys here in the first place for, if you're not going to do the goddamn jobs that we elected the people to be there to fucking do it in the first fucking place, right? And it bothers me to shit about this. And I agree with you, everything up until that point was a LARP, but like, it opened up the eyes of a lot of people on the revolutionary side of this, that were like, you know what, we might actually have to fucking do this. So you guys might want to start getting prepared for it, right? And I took that to heart. So
okay, yeah, that's fair. George, you haven't talked in a while. You have anything to say?
Yeah, I agree with Jay Burden. Like, if anyone's expecting anything to come from this other than, like, more people like tut-tutting that, oh man, we need to come together as a country, we need to stamp out these revolutionary sentiments, very insect opinions. I'm more inclined to that. And yeah, as for like the revolutionary stuff, no way, dude. The United States is like, that happens in like shithole countries in like Africa and like South Asia, where like the median age is like in the 20s or whatever, or not even in the 20s, like maybe below 20. Yeah, if you ask like any normal person about it, it's like, they'll think it was like crazy, like in a bad way, and not like, I don't know, like America's an older country. The elites. Oh yeah, I guess I was going to talk about this. January 6th started as like kind of like a moment where the elites kind of like came together because they're under attack by the peasants, And I really do mean the peasants because, like Trump supporters and conservatives in general are like second class citizens in this country, at least like, sociopolitically. If you go to China, all the cool people are in the Communist Party. If you go to the United States, all the cool people are basically liberals or Democrats. And the Republicans are the outer party. So, yeah, thinking that there's going to be like a revolutionary seed plan because of this, I don't see it. And there was going back to the elites were united by January 6th. It was kind of like a traumatic unifying event for them. Justin Amash had an interview with Michael Malice, and he said that a lot of their like showy disputes were kind of a show, and there's a lot more agreement in the background on Congress. That's another point to illustrate that this unity among elites was already there, and it was probably like further solidified by what they call political violence. And if you watch,
really,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. No. I was continue with finish what you're saying.
And another indication of this is if you watch media, if you watch elite media, like stuff you have to like pay for. And I illustrated this earlier with Star Trek Picard as like one example. Like January 6th is in the consciousness of the elite, of the cool people of this country. So actually, instead of like planting a seed for like revolution amongst the American people, it planted a seed of like unity among the elites, like watching their back. I'm trying to think of like examples of this in like other countries to like further get across of what I'm trying to say. Maybe Yuri Andropov having a panic attack during the Hungarian Revolution with that like cemented his authoritarian tendencies. I think that's like a minuscule example of the phenomenon I'm talking about. And obviously the United States isn't like the USSR, so it's not going to like, we're not going to have like gulags or anything like that. But
I have a question for you, George. If in
Aiden wants gulags.
If in one of these shithole countries you speak of, the head of state was assassinated, and then decades later it was revealed that the assassin was a contact of another faction of the government, what would you call that in a shithole country?
Let's like cut the cheese here. You're referring to like Lee Harvey Oswald being in contact with like Cuban exiles.
How are we defining "quote unquote" shithole country? Because like I've people use that term.
Let's go.
Because like you could argue that Canada is a shithole country because they basically have because of their eugenics policy.
Would you mind living? Oh, actually, no.
You're talking about like the global south / third world, right?
Countries.
Okay.
Yeah, like countries that are basically like prey to.
You call it a coup, right? You call it a coup.
I wouldn't call it a coup necessarily. Okay,
yeah,
I don't.
If the president was assassinated in a quote unquote shithole country by another faction of the government, you'd call that a coup. But here, what? So what?
During the in lead up to, well, actually, let's not get lost in this. I mean, like, okay, what are you trying to get at? Like, okay,
what I'm getting at is that our government has been illegitimate since 1963, and
oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say the government itself. I wouldn't say the entire government is because I think that the problem is, and I think this is where European countries have kind of a more realistic view of like or perspective of the government. Because like when we say the government here in the United States, we think of like the entire collective apparatus of the state, every single institution. So the bureaucracy, the legislative, the executive, the courts, the cops, the military, all of that is the government. That's how we view it in the US. Whereas in European countries, what's interesting is the way, so the term government usually refers to the ruling, I guess sort of the ruling coalition under a specific administration. However, when they view like they don't have the same concept of like criticizing the government as we do, because we might do it as a whole, especially like American libertarians or progressives. But the thing is, they will identify specific elements of it and criticize those elements. Like they don't see it as this large totality. So in like the UK, like you'll barely see people just protesting like you won't see anti-government protests. You will see people who are maybe protesting, like, I don't know, the defunding of the NHS or something, or people
What about
who
France? What about in France? What about the Yellow Vests?
Oh, the Yellow Vests.
Yeah, no, that
amazing.
was specific. No, that was specifically protesting financial institutions and Macron's administration. It wasn't like a protest against like the legislative. It wasn't a protest against the bureaucracy. It was specifically a protest.
Own that shit.
So, like, am I making sense by saying this? Like, they separate. Yeah. They don't view the government like they don't have like this. They don't view it as Leviathan like we do in the United States.
Well,
not everyone in the United States uses Leviathan.
Yeah.
Well, that is, I mean, that is sort of the default, the cultural default that we go to when we think of the government.
I mean, again, like cool people view the government as like something that should, like, you know.
Well, most people aren't cool.
Well, yeah, most people are like peasants and insects, like us. Anyway, do you remember that ad?
Who are you, dude? Who are you to be calling people insects, man? Who the fuck
I'm also
are you?
He's being sarcastic.
I'm like pointing at you and pointing at me and like, hey, we're insects. Anyway,
no, I'm not an insect. I'm a human.
Do you remember that ad
yourself.
During the Obama administration called Julia, where like it was like this woman like had cradle to grave benefits from the government?
A welfare queen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can call her that.
I don't know. I don't know what specific.
Yeah, I don't remember this, but I'm willing to.
Okay, never mind. I mean, like the cool people believe in like, you know, government that has like interactions with people, and that this is a good thing, and it's not just transactionary. It's spiritual, almost. You know, I think this revolutionary element in the United States manifests. I don't know. I'm not even sure if it manifests. It doesn't manifest politically. I'll just say that.
I wouldn't even call it revolutionary necessarily, because you have plenty of people who are non-revolutionaries who will criticize the government, or at least certain aspects of the government.
Like every Western country criticizes the government, you know.
Well, that's true. That's fair, but like it manifests in different ways. That's what I'm saying. And I'd say, I wouldn't say America's necessarily, I'd say there's definitely a rebellious, rugged spirit to America, but I wouldn't call it fundamentally universal. I wouldn't call it revolutionary. Even the American Revolution is a misnomer of the term. I think Aiden will disagree with me on this, but I don't think the American Revolution was a revolution, really.
I think that revolution means something very specific. So the difference between a revolution, right, is that we are tearing down the social order to build something new.
Correct.
Whereas a rebellion would be, and this is your point about the American Revolution, is like, oh, we are the social contract has been broken, right? The rules of our rulers are not adhering to what they said, so we are getting rid of them to put new rulers, normally in connection with the tradition, right? If you read the American founders, this was very much, you know, their line of reasoning. Yep. And to me, at least, I see revolution as something fundamentally of entropy and of the left, right? And that doesn't mean that I like our government. That doesn't mean that every government is inherently legitimate. But the idea that, I guess, rebellion and revolution are the same is fundamentally, at least from my perspective, absurd. And I'm kind of confused how we got here in the first place.
Yeah, let's write it back.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think we should segue back.
I want to finish my thought. Nobody really objected that our government has been illegitimate since 1963. So everyone's talking this big guff about how, the Capitol got stormed. They're in jail for trespassing right now. But no, the people are not the ones trespassing in Congress. The politicians are the ones trespassing. They've been trespassing since 1963. And yeah, any sort of protest like January 6th is, in my view, legitimate because we have an illegitimate government. We're supposed to have a government for, by, and of the people. And it's like Damnation said, when the people come knocking at the door, suddenly they're all hiding under their seats. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
They're afraid of their constituents. Because they know that they don't represent the people.
Fucking know. They fucking know they don't represent.
Yeah, they're perfectly aware that they don't represent the people. They're terrified of the people. And the people just don't realize their power. And I think the significance of January 6th, other than what Jay Burden said about like catalyzing the liberals to see Trump as Orange Hitler, is that I think inadvertently it demonstrates the power of the people. Like, yeah, if you want to walk into the Capitol building, they're way outnumbered. We totally can. And this idea,
I actually fundamentally disagree. I feel like this disproves the lie of populism. Right? You did it. You got into the Capitol.
When you're done, after you're finished, Net 7, we're gonna let Net 7 go.
Yeah, sorry, Net 7. Didn't mean to. So
no, you didn't interrupt. I'm just saying Net 7 after you.
Yeah, I got it. So they did it, and what happened? Well, they didn't have any organization. They didn't have any elite support.
No,
and
they got let in because it was a Reichstag fire.
Well, okay, then. So do we just have to try it again with different circumstances? Will that work? Like, to me, this seems like we've seen the lie of just protest or just people power will somehow solve this issue. I think that we tried it and it didn't work. You know, that the same thing that allegedly has worked for the left, that has allegedly worked for the liberals, of like, oh, just protest in the streets and you'll get what you want. Well, it's not a symmetrical game.
It hasn't allegedly worked for the left. It worked for the left in 1917. It worked for the left in 1949. But
well, no, it didn't work in 1917. It worked in 1917 because there was a massive international support network. There was a group of like hardened revolutionaries.
What are you talking about? The USSR got invaded by like 13 countries after the revolution. They didn't have an international support network.
Where did Lenin come from?
Yeah, where did Lenin
was bankrolled by Wall Street.
He was bankrolled by Swiss billionaires, but there was not an international or not billionaires.
Okay, who sent him back to Russia? Was it the Swiss?
Yeah, it was a Swiss. I don't remember his name. Some Swiss rich guy. Yeah, because that's how it works. Because you know, like Trump only got in because he has like Sheldon Adelson and people in the ruling class. But I mean, that's just how it is. But I'm sure this Swiss person was not very happy about the fact that the USSR was born. I mean, none of the Western capitalists were.
Well, except for Ford. I mean, the West was happy to bankroll this.
Ford bankrolled the Nazis to do Operation Barbarossa. Anyway, we're getting afield.
Yeah, Net 7 was also wanting to go too. So
yeah, Net 7. You talk.
Okay, so no, I don't agree with Alden Stone saying that, you know, hey, this stuff is like legitimate and it's a good thing that we go and show these politicians what kind of power we have. That's just ridiculousness. I mean, it's the same thing that the Black Lives Matter, Antifa terrorists and anarchists did when they decided to go burn down cities.
It is not the
throughout
same,
this country.
It's not the same thing at all. They were burning.
Excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. They did. It's the same thing. I'm a bit more respectful than you.
Yeah, that's
hey guys. No need. Just be both of you guys. Just say what you need to say.
I didn't start it. He did. Anyway, but the reality is that when you saw anarchists, throughout this country, smashing people's businesses, burning buildings down, attacking police officers, literally at times trying to burn down government buildings. Portland's a great example of that, and even in the case in which they literally took over an entire section of the city, and the government, rather than stop this nonsense, the city government placated to the mob. It was federal pressure that eventually local pressure too, after people got killed, that forced them to stop this. This idea that somehow we have to stop that, but if these people who are on the right, go and as try to cause a riot at the Capitol and then try to storm government buildings, hey, that's showing our how angry we are. No, look, the reality is that a Republican Party is supposed to be about law and order, and it's supposed to be about respect for the institutions. And that, yes, if you have a problem, protest and, make your voice heard, and sometimes you're going to be heard, your voice is going to be harsh, and that's okay. But don't go and assault police officers and start screaming, hang Mike Pence, okay? Because then you have crossed the line from political free speech and discourse to essentially, calls for the dismantling of the republic. And the reality is that both of these instances of January 6th and the George Floyd riots, obviously more people died during George Floyd riots because there were more of them, and rather than what happened in January 6th. But the reality is that you cannot accept this sort of disgusting behavior from anyone, because the reality is that when these people were burning down cities, in the name of so-called racial justice, which was just completely false. These people were just essentially trying to burn down the system. I
want to say, can I intercede? Can I intercede real quick?
I'm just going to finish like literally right now. Yeah, you're essentially a domestic terrorist. And when you, and in the case of January 6th, when you attack the police, try to storm the building, and your goal is to hang Mike Pence, you are a domestic terrorist.
Why are you wearing a mask? Why are you wearing a mask while you're simping for the establishment? Like, what are you afraid of?
Hold on, Aiden.
I'm not afraid of shit.
I think he's wearing a mask for the same reason we just have our avatars up. Like, I think that.
I don't have a camera. I'd have my avatar up anyway.
The thing that we have to realize about this, right, is can we all agree that this country was basically started by a bunch of fucking terrorists, right? Right?
No.
Yes.
No, that's just not. That's not true at all.
Absolutely not.
You're gonna tell me that the fucking Sons of Liberty were not a terrorist organization?
Well, that is one specific element that partook in the American Revolution.
No, that wasn't a loyalist.
I'm just saying that the Sons of Liberty were a very, very small sect, a very radical sect within the wider revolution as a whole. And when I say the American Revolution, I don't mean the war. I mean the movement that lasted from 1765 through 1793. But in general, I do. I disagree. I would not have been a Son of Liberty. I absolutely would have. I would have opposed the taxes, but at the same time, I would have opposed the destruction of private property belonging to the British East India Company. But at the same time, we need to remember, again, like there were these radical sects, but the revolutionary cause, it was not a monolith. There were various different, groups that all came together in a common interest. They all disliked, for some reason or other, what the British were doing. But we need to remember the infrastructure for the American Revolution was actually the Southern aristocracy. And when I say this, I'm not trying. I'm not. Before anybody assumes, I'm not saying this in that whole 1619 project way, like, America was founded to preserve. But I just mean literally, they were. It was the upper middle class and the landowners. So I guess aristocracy in the American sense, but not like nobility. But like the gentry in a lot of ways. They were the leaders. They were the thought leaders of the American Revolution, both in the North and the South. The economic, like the funding for the war itself came from Southern planters. And it was, we need to remember, and this is where I interviewed about 2 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Benjamin Teitelbaum. We were talking about a book that he had published called War for Eternity, which was about the influence of perennial traditionalism on the modern American right, particularly in like someone like Steve Bannon, who he followed around and interviewed. And this is something that's interesting. So Steve Bannon, from what he told me, Steve Bannon believes that the metaphysical backbone or foundation of America is the white working class. And I made sure to comment, I don't think that makes very much sense, because if that were the case, then America would have been founded by the white working class, which isn't the case. We need to remember the American Revolution was a revolution of the middle class. It was a bourgeois revolution. And
so can we get back to January 6th?
Well, let me
hold on, let Evan say something, then we'll get back to January 6th.
Yeah, let me comment too. The American Revolution was not the sort of revolutionary spirit of the French Revolution, which was
Absolutely
to literally. It's the American Revolution was largely set about by people who were fighting for their rights that they saw as Englishmen. They were not out to destroy the system. They were out simply to say, look, We have rights as Englishmen, and therefore we want them. They saw their local assemblies, as equal to the parliamentary assemblies. These people were not out fighting for full-blown democracy. George Washington, for example, saw himself in the way of Cincinnatus, and other leaders, saw themselves as simply, look, we are of the mother country of Great Britain, and we're not fighting for democracy. We're not fighting for radical change. I mean, this had happened before in English history, with the English Civil War, with the parliamentarians versus the King Charles. There were many different factions in the parliamentarians. There were people like Oliver Cromwell, and who wanted to change and reform the system, but not dissolve it into what other people like the levelers wanted, which was complete full-blown democratic institutions. So I don't think that the comparison that Eldamation 3 said works.
Loyalist through and through. Didn't Oliver Cromwell only take power after the monarchs were beheaded?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely had support in Parliament, but yes, he didn't actually become the I forget what his official title was. Lord Protector, I think.
He didn't become
Lord Protector.
He didn't become Lord Protector of England until after Charles the First.
They call it the
his
Glorious
head
Revolution.
was.
I don't know what you're talking about with this reform stuff.
Well, actually, okay, I'd say
Because-
the American
because
Revolution.
what-
Let me make a good let me make, I think, an analogy that I feel like is probably the most appropriate one. So the American Revolution is a revolution in the same way that the establishment of the Church of England was part of the Reformation. It wasn't. It's called that. They were schisms. The American Revolution was a schismatic movement away from the British Empire. It wasn't trying to upend the social order. Very similarly, like for instance, you often see the creation of the Church of England under Henry VIII back in the mid-16th century. It is often characterized as being a part of the Protestant Reformation, like in the vein of Luther back on the continent. But while there was an English Reformation, that did not begin for another 60 years after the Church of England was established, and ultimately the English Reformation failed utterly. And it was the reason for that was because, yes, the Church of England gained independence from the Catholic Church, but theologically it was almost identical to Catholicism.
Yeah.
Very similarly, you can compare that to like the United States splitting away from the British Empire. It was still a fundamentally Anglo culture. The culture was the same. We still modeled our institutions based off of the British political institutions that sort of have their roots in the writings of John Locke and Thomas Hobbes. John Locke, of course, I sometimes refer to him as the forgotten founder because without him there would be no American political system, because he was the one who came up with the idea of like separation of powers and the idea of judicial, executive, blah blah blah, whatever. But either way, we copied a lot. Yes, we put our own spin on them, but we copied a lot of these ideas. We transferred them over. Our social structure was different, but that's really just due to various pieces of context like geography and who immigrated here to begin with, because you didn't have the nobility from Britain did not immigrate to the Americas. It was basically middle-class people who ended up establishing their own aristocracies, which is why you got like the old Virginia families and stuff like that, of which I am part of one. So not to brag, but I guess I'm aristocracy.
Okay, none of that's germane to like anything in the present. So anyway,
no, but I'm just differentiating that the American Revolution was not a revolution. But to segue back to the actual topic, because we do this a lot on the Political Pigpen. Mm-hmm. Also, January 6th, 2021 was most certainly not a revolution either. It was.
Hell no, I will agree with you on that. It was not.
Like I just remember there was that clip where there was that lady being interviewed. It was like, I tried running into the Capitol and I got pepper sprayed. And then the interviewer says, why are you storming the Capitol? Or like, what are you doing here anyway? Why was that? Or why did they pepper spray you? We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution. Do you guys remember that?
So yeah, this sentiment is kind of
Yeah.
like pointed towards like why like the revolutionary, rebellious, whatever you want to call it, streak in the United States is gone. Or like any other like gay, old, tired, advanced country, at least domestically. Just because like we're not. Yeah. Again, like this, like just like even like joking about like something like, even that like kind of kisses this rebellious streak, that we're like mocking it, kind of just like shows how unserious it is. Unserious the notion is, like we're still a rugged or rebellious country is.
Yeah.
All right, gents. I think we're capped out at how big the stream is, and I don't know how much more I have to add. But Lou Templar, aka Cringe Walker, he wants to tag in, so I'm gonna give him my spot. It was good talking to you guys. Hopefully, I'll be able to come on later.
Absolutely.
But I will,
do you want to go ahead
and
and plug yourself?
Oh,
Go ahead and
okay,
plug
yeah.
yourself
Well,
right now.
obviously, I gave my plugs at the beginning. I'm not just coming to drop my info and then dip. But you can find me the Jay Burden Show, where I mostly do interviews. I had the Politicrat on just recently. We had a good talk, and thanks for talking, guys. I enjoyed it. See you guys later.
Absolutely. You're welcome back anytime.
Peace
Yeah,
out,
sure
man.
thing, man.
Take care. All right, so we are going to bring Kringvolker, as I call him, in here. But either way, continue with what you're. I forget. Was it Net 7? You had something to say?
No, I was just saying goodbye that time.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so in the meantime, while we wait for Luke Templar, I am going to show you this. This is what I was just referring to. It is actually really funny. Hold on. Do I have? Let's see. Oh, share system audio. Wait. Hold on. Yep, there we go. Okay, watch this. This is actually really funny.
I got maced.
You got maced. And what happened? You were trying to go inside the Capitol?
I made it like a foot inside, and they pushed me out, and they maced me.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
I don't know. That always.
What a fucking.
It's funny. I've heard that was a joke. She was just a troll. However, I really want that to be true.
She didn't look like a troll.
No, but the funniest story. No, the funniest story I heard that came out of that day. I don't know if this one was true, but there were people who were reporting on it. That one of the people who died in the January 6th, or I forget if died or hospitalized, somebody who was carrying a "Don't Tread on Me" Gadsden flag, and then they ended up getting stomped over and trampled. Running up to during the actual during the Zerg.
I appreciate the meme of that, but yeah, that
I want it to be true because it's just beautiful irony.
This is where I even disagree with a lot of the people you would quote unquote associate me with, which would be the fucking libertarians and shit like that. But now those guys are gay and cringe too. So.
Anyway, we have a new member of the panel, Luth Templar, or Kringvolker, as I typically call him. How are you doing this evening?
I'm happy to raise the average IQ here above sub-Saharan African levels. So, hello.
Or Damnation. I think Damnation maybe lost connection.
Oh,
but yes, hello. Do you want to go? Just go ahead and introduce yourself to those who might.
I was at work when all that nonsense happened, and I was just kind of giggling. I work at a very progressive firm, and so all the progressives were kind of panicking. I mostly just laughed inside because I was like, before Mr. Moldbug wrote his famous line, they were much like kids at the end of a video game layer where the level didn't end and they just didn't know what to do.
That's what I said at the very beginning of the stream. I said that exact same thing. I mean, I didn't know it was Moldbug who said it, but that was like
who said it. Yeah. And I rather like that sentiment because I just sat there like, I mean, to fear some barbarian horde taking the Senate is the equivalent of of just not knowing how the government works. Well, like
that's just, exactly.
The government is not the building. The building is a theater where power is executed.
That's true.
I was saying that could. I was saying like in the beginning of the stream that I feel like the January 6th that could be a setup for National Treasure 3, where Nicolas Cage has to steal Nancy Pelosi's laptop to find the navigational charts to find Hyperborea.
He'll have to go digging through all the shit stains, so that's unfortunate.
So so he could get the navigational charts for Hyperborea.
So yeah, I just kind of like, why do I care? Like I didn't even really watch the whole thing because it was like at the end of the day, you could blow up the entire Senate and the military would come in and force elections again. That America is what I like to call it as a it's a revolution-proof country. There will never be a revolution in this country. It's revolution-proof. Because at the end of the day, like, a million soldiers will just come in and gun everybody down and restore order. It's just the way it is.
I'd say usually I guess this is me putting my Spenglerian glasses on, but typically the more and more the older and older a civilization gets and the more and more centralized that states become, particularly like the core hegemonies or hegemons within the civilizational like ecumene, which would in this case be the United States. Revolution becomes more and more difficult due to that the military force, or due to like the presence of a large military.
It's not only the military force; it's also the inherent geography of the continent. It's just it doesn't favor revolution. It's impossible.
It was the same with Italy too, back during Rome.
No, Italy is not revolution proof. It has had many revolutions.
I mean, it has. No, I'm just saying back during the context of the ancient world, because like the world. Am I making sense? The world has gotten bigger, and so like in a sense,
I mean,
geography is more limited. So it's like that's
information is no longer limited by geography, but people still are, and that's just the way it is. The thing is, like, there are like revolution-proof cultures on this planet. I would actually call China revolution-proof because even after the CCP, like, what did the CCP become after the revolution? Just it literally just transformed back to the imperial model. You can't stop.
So actually, So all it was the establishment of the CCP. Oh, so
anyway,
it's interesting. China, like Chinese history, it's all a bunch of like series. It's sort of, I don't want to say history repeating itself, but it's this constant dynastic cycle, rises and falls, and you could see very many parallels between Mao Zedong and Shi Huangdi, who founded the Qin dynasty back in the 3rd century BC, who basically burned all the books, tried to stage this massive cultural revolution. Within 20 years, the Qin dynasty collapsed and made way for the Han dynasty.
Anyway, I'm gonna clear up this autism because this is not the topic of the topic.
Sorry, you just get me excited when we're talking about history.
Yeah, I was just giving an example, not a paragraph. But so at the end of the day, like that's what it is. Now, I would say I'll give a hot take. As far as I'm concerned, an insurrection is just a revolution that failed, and an insurrection that succeeds is called a revolution. There's no difference. It's just a status if you failed or won. No one looks at an insurrection that failed and calls it that. They call it a revolution. No one looks at a revolution that succeeded and call it an insurrection. They call it a revolution. These are just terms for if you succeeded or not. So ultimately, we call it an insurrection because it failed, because it was a complete failure. I would call it an insurrection in the sense of what that word means historically. If a bunch of farmers get angry at your tax code and they start burning shit down, that's called an insurrection. It's not a revolution. No matter how much that black-haired Karen wants to bitch about it, it's not a revolution. It's a bunch of angry farmers that got angry that they didn't get what they wanted. They were told to come along to the Capitol. They yelled and hoot and hollered, took a shit around the corner, and then went home or got arrested. So it's an
populist
insurrection.
revolt.
It's not a revolt because the revolt has a goal. They didn't have a goal. What was their goal?
I guess I mean, they were basically just spurging out. That was pretty much.
It's a spurg out. I mean, you could say their goal was to undo an election. Okay, then what? You're just gonna stop half the country not from like destroying you? Yeah, cope and see. I don't care. Much to the chagrin of many of my friends, I don't really give a shit about these people. They're kind of just chuds, to use a leftist term.
Chudsmas, as George calls January 6th.
Yeah, and a lot of my friends like wanted to see something out of that, but like I'm like, well, why? What does this accomplish other than like fidgeting or like there's a word for it. Like it's a venting maneuver. It's like it's a public venting ritual. And you see this from time to time, both on the left and the right. BLM was the same shit. It's like there's really no difference between BLM and the January 6th thing. It's just a public venting ritual. and the end result was the same. Nothing happened. Like, at least the Democrats, when they have their side do public rituals like this, they say the right things to calm them down and pretend like they do things, and then the people forget and they think something's happening, and then 6 months later another black guy gets shot and nothing changed. But whatever, that's just the way it goes. The reason why Republicans are incompetent is because they don't know how to manage when these things happen. They have no idea how to manage it. They just kind of panic. And in many ways, 2 years later, that panic is still happening in different manifestations with the vote. Don't know if McCarthy's going to become speaker, but all this is just like an extension of that. It's a public vent because Mitch McConnell cut off the funding to MAGA candidates, and now the quote-unquote Freedom Caucus is cutting off the votes to Mitch McConnell's speaker. It's what goes around comes around, Mitch. You shouldn't have fucked over some people. They're going to fuck you over back. And the same relationship happens with Democrat-run cities and their police officers and then their BLM riots. It's like, well, I mean, this is a back and forth. That's a few thoughts to process. I don't know what anyone thinks about that bullshit.
I think you're pretty right on. You're just kind of black-pilled.
It's not black-pilled. No, I'm pro-empire. I don't want the United States to collapse.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, I vote Democrat pretty much always. So like, I don't care. Like, it's from my perspective, I really am Leanne, whatever her name was, telling the people to go eat cake and shut the fuck up. It just so happens there's not enough of them to behead me.
You should climb onto the national liberal bandwagon.
No, I hate liberals too. I'm just
What do you call yourself?
I don't care. Like, I really don't care. I just care about power and winning. That's it. I'll make my
No,
decision.
but we need to remember ideology is just a mask for power. I think it was Sam Francis who originally said that.
Yeah, I'll do Palpatine. I'll speak about democracy and then wipe it away when it's in the way. I don't care.
I love democracy.
It's whatever works. Like, it's just whatever works and gets things running. Keep the ship running. And if
what do you mean if you're pro-empire? Why? Like, what? You're happy. What do you mean? Why do you want power?
I am happy. The United States is displaying the greatest extent of its power in its history. We're tackling a world power in Ukraine.
You're just like a cheerleader?
No, I mean, it's just the reality of it. It's like the United States has never been revealed to be as powerful as it is now. It will eventually enter a catabolic phase of consolidation, but even then, it will still manage to come out as a stronger core, even if the peripheral is a little bit starved.
So in terms of like empire, so I'm probably the only member of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus who you will ever hear supporting
part of the Mises Caucus. Oh my God, we got to talk about that offline.
No, but either way, just
to quickly
they are good people. Damnation. We will talk about this later. No, but this is probably the only time you'll ever hear a member of the Mises Caucus supporting imperialism. But I do unironically consider myself an imperialist. However, imperialist can be used to refer to, I guess, there are different kinds of imperialists, and it kind of depends on what strategy upon which they wish to predicate the building of that empire. I know I'd say that, and I don't know if Net 7 identifies as an imperialist, but neoconservatism, foreign policy wise, like in practice, it is a subset. It is an imperialist strategy. However, so it's like my variant of imperialism would differ from the hawkish establishment. But either way, I think that we need to get out of Europe. Europe needs to take care of its own devices. Like, if we're going to institute imperium, it needs to be in the Pacific. It needs to be in Indochina, needs to be in Southeast Asia. We need to build a network of vassal states in order to curtail this. Well, specifically China, because we are coming closer and closer, not only to Thucydides' trap, but also what Huntington predicted as the clash of civilizations.
So I'm not really worried about China beyond like.
I think it's actually closer to collapse than people give it credit.
No, it's not going to collapse. Again, China's another revolution-proof country. It has a pretty set cycle of what they describe as the heavenly mandate. How that works under their current atheism, I don't give a shit. But like the geography and culture of China are such that it just has these phases of rising and lowering. Because of its bureaucratic nature, being a bureaucracy in the year 4000 BC makes you the most advanced culture on the planet. Being a bureaucracy in the year 2023 AD makes you an average nobody. Like it's just a matter of time. China was very quick in history to organize itself under a very successful model that has proven time and time again to be stable, not necessarily efficient or capable of advancement, but stable. And so, when China's in its stable phases, it will outperform most countries on stability, not on innovation. And when China's in one of its warring states period, it'll actually kind of have these mini episodes of being like Europe, where it'll enter like local innovations that then self-consolidate into new power structures that return to the norm of imperium. China only really advances under warring states periods, as far as I know, and occasionally when they're like investing in culture and technology under a stable period. Other than that, China's just stagnant. It's always been stagnant. You could go back in time 4,000 years and there'll be a little difference. The only difference between 4,000 years ago China and today is that there's electricity in cars. That's about it.
I'd agree with that. I would say that culturally speaking, that is the case. And this is where China is kind of unique compared to the other high civilizations, of which there were about nine high civilizations in history. China's interesting in that even though it has had rises and falls and has existed in probably about two major incarnations, one which ended with the fall of the Han Dynasty, and then the other which began about the 5th century AD. Even though those are two completely different incarnations, much in the same way as the Greco-Roman world and the Christian/modern West are two different incarnations of Western civilization. The only difference is there are very overt cultural distinctions between the Greco-Roman society and our society. Whereas even though the two incarnations of sort of Chinese civilization, they're still virtually identical in terms of like their worldviews, their architecture.
Well, yeah, like China, whatever. I forgot what word. I don't know. I forgot what word they call themselves in actual Chinese, but like it means Middle Kingdom. But that's that's a mistranslation. It's not Middle Kingdom. It's Center Kingdom. It gets mistranslated English. Center, as in the center of the world, as in the world is the pole of the world orbits around the center. And
that's why China's a civilization state. Uniquely.
Anyway, wait, let me finish.
That's why they never expanded.
No, they do expand, but they expand as long as it's orbiting the center. And this is why when China has its revolutions, it is implicitly understood that if you're having a revolution of China, that translates to we are revolting to form a new center. It's not it's not really to change the world order. It's basically to make a new center. In the West, when you have a revolution, it's to create a new power structure, a new hierarchy, a new order. In the East, well, not the East, in China specifically, when you have a revolution, what that ends up meaning in their culture is this is the new center. It's not actually changing the structure or the power. There can be elements of that, like with the push for feminism and equality that they had during Mao and afterwards. But even
that was
now,
just imported though.
Well, yeah, and even now with the recent Congress, they essentially just swept all that under the rug and no, we're going to ban abortion and fine single women. We're going back to the center of the old order. China banning abortion and finding single women is nothing more than a return to pre-1950 norms. It's just China re-centering itself. You could easily argue that the period from World War I and World War II into modern times has been something of a semi-warring states period, even when it wasn't after Mao. Because even after Mao took over, there were still regional captains of the revolution that wanted to do their own thing, and there's always been parts of China that operate. So anyway, to compare this to January 6th, January 6th, their whole spiel was, oh, we're going to overthrow the election and bring back Donald Trump because we think there was cheating in the election. That doesn't happen in China because the elections are just theater. Everyone knows it's just who can power broke the senatorial regional leaders the most into a stable order. And so when they revolt, it's not really to overdo an election or pick a new leader. It's to form a new center, and then nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that is the true. That is the case. But I would even make the argument that perhaps revolution is a fundamentally Western concept, at least how we understand it. Because I guess in the West, one of the prime metaphysical values that we hold dear to us, that's part of our identity, is the desire for emancipation from, I guess, I don't want to say hierarchies, because I mean there's hierarchies everywhere, but emancipation, I guess, from quote unquote oppression. However, it doesn't matter however you define oppression, but everybody sees it differently. But then, whereas, for instance, there is nothing higher that we as Westerners value more, other than like maybe God, but than the idea of liberty. Of course, we might interpret liberty differently, but liberty, the individualism, that sort of thing, things that do not exist in China. There is absolutely no concept.
Hold
on. Let me finish. There is no concept of the individual in China. Absolutely not. Like the atomic unit of Chinese society is the family unit.
Yeah.
That is what their identity is based on. Like, I mean, I remember I made a documentary way back in high school for a project where I had to interview, where I interviewed various Chinese exchange students on sort of like the cultural assimilation, sort of the culture shock that they faced in coming here. They all talked about how, one of them said something that's always stuck with me. It says, your idea, you guys like freedom a lot. It was, I'm just paraphrasing him, but he says he was basically saying, I think it's strange that you guys value freedom as much as you guys do, because I grew up, freedom is seen as a scary thing. And he more or less said, the Westerner yearns to be free, whereas the Chinese demand to be ruled. Like, basically, they value that sort of structure and authority, and that totalitarianism, in a sense, just as much as we do liberty in the West. And that's something that like neither culture is going to be able to fundamentally understand or comprehend, like why that is the case.
I wouldn't say that the individual doesn't exist in China. The individuality is a reward for growing number of people that trust you. The higher up the hierarchy you get, the more independent you can be. But the further down the hierarchy you are, the more you're expected to serve as part of a unit. That's why at the bottom of the ring, when you're a child or a young person, you serve the family. But as you grow old, you gain certain levels of sovereignty to rule over things and to set the character and the pace of the unit you rule over, although you're still under larger systems above you. It's really just a hierarchy in which like the emperor has the most sovereignty as the individual, that whose will and culture and language and
I see what you're saying. Kind of like what Hegel was talking about back in his philosophy of history, the idea that the more and more, his theory was, the more and more that time has progressed, the freedom, the concept of like individual freedom has like trickled down more and more to like more people.
And that's a product of wealth, right? So like if you go back in time to before Europe became very rich because it was like colonizing the world, the sense of individualism did not really exist either unless you earned it through knightly honor, through rulership, things like that. Like in medieval Europe, the individual did exist in the form of the knight, in the form of the intern or the journeyman. Like these were things that you had to earn individuality. It wasn't assumed at birth. Individuality was a thing you fought for and earned for and progressed in life towards.
But it was still a rights-based culture, in the sense where there were legal rights and protections even for the poorest of peasants, and they were viewed as individuals whose opinions mattered. Maybe not as much as the knight, but the thing is, that is not the case in China. Even though individualism has definitely like skyrocketed and expanded, and I'd say even to a toxic degree ever since the 1960s, but individualism as sort of like a philosophical, metaphysical, spiritual concept defines Western man, and does not exist. It does not exist in China. Like the individual only exists on a practical level in other non-Western cultures.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I can point to the legends of Zheng Bogo, who was a regional admiral. I forget when he was. It might have been somewhere after the year 1000, maybe a little bit but he was Zheng Bogo was Korean but worked in the Chinese administration, the bureaucracy, and he worked himself up and he basically did not like the fact that his people were slaves in China. There were a significant number of slaves in China, and so he fought something of a pirate war across China to essentially earn the right to demand the emperor set his people go free. It's kind of like almost like a Moses myth. He was a real person, but no, not Zheng He, Zhang Bogo, Jang G, not Zheng He. That doesn't even sound similar. Zhang Bogo, Bogo. You're deaf, dude. Zhang Bogo, there he is. Zhang Bogo this guy is a medieval big boss. In so much as he had a secret navy base that was like outer heaven, he raised up a private army to free his people. Like, read up on him; he's pretty cool. But he's a good example of like individuality and the rights of the slaves in the Eastern times. Yeah, the year 700. So like this guy's around the same time as Charlemagne, and he's basically like if you read him as a Westerner, you wouldn't see much different from him compared to like someone like Moses or if you play video games, someone like Big Boss. Yeah, he's basically famous for his private Wando. Yeah, if you read the intro there, go ahead and read the intro if you want, and tell me if it doesn't sound like Big Boss. I'll read it if you want. I'll read the introduction if you want. If you don't want to.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Actually, no. Let's talk about this after. We are really getting off topic.
Well, I would argue this is somewhat related because he did.
I would too. I would. I definitely.
I'm trying to relate this to J6, man. I'm trying. But yeah. Someone's yelling if using Wikipedia as a source. I don't care. If you find a better source, tell me. Otherwise, I don't care.
But before we go to our intermission, though,
there's an intermission.
Yeah,
okay, go ahead.
No, before we go to our intermission, I just wanted to go back to the idea we were talking about. I remember how people are treating it like 9/11, and this is something that has always bothered me. Like, I can't comprehend how or why they would see it like that. Like, how is it even comparable? It's like, yeah, January 6th was an embarrassment to the country, and it definitely was a dark moment, a brief moment, but a dark moment nonetheless. But how can you compare it to 9/11? It's almost insulting. Like, I don't know if they're just saying this to get clicks, because being hyperbolic and being hysterical gets more views, or if they genuinely believe this, because I don't understand how anybody could genuinely believe that.
All right, I'll tell you why it's like 9/11, even though I don't think so. Like, at a deep level, everyone knows that this is, everyone knows 9/11 happened because we were poking our nose in places we shouldn't. It's not that they hate our freedom. We were poking our nose too many places. Everyone knows that. No, it's true.
Bullshit. You know that.
No, it's not true. We were poking our nose in places. I'm sorry. They don't hate our freedom.
Shut the fuck up, Puke Piker.
No, they don't. I'm sorry, but they didn't hate our freedom. They didn't bother us until.
Yeah, they did. Okay. Yeah.
Then why aren't they doing it now?
Because they still hate us. Okay. They literally cut people's heads off. Okay.
In their country.
For literally listening to Western music. Okay. And they literally want to do that over here. Okay. 9/11 was
because they don't want. Excuse me. Let them. They don't want democracy.
Let them try. Yeah. Where are they? Let them try.
Let them try. Yeah, that's what happened when we did it with 9/11. That's where we had to take the war to them. Okay, so fuck what you just said.
What did that do? 20 years of war, and what did it do? Did anything happen? It changed?
Yeah, it did. We killed Osama bin Laden. We killed Zawahiri. We threw Al Qaeda literally almost into the dustbin. Okay,
and guess
then
what? They took over.
Sabotage. No, what they do? Okay, the Taliban took over because of fucking Taliban. Okay, listening to people like yourself and Puke Piker and all the other regressors like Kremlin Kyle, instead of actually having some goddamn sense, listening to the military leaders who were saying, hey, leave a residual force, don't fucking pull out. And guess what? Biden didn't. And guess what happened?
Wait, I would never.
And I'm just gonna say this, okay?
Hey, both of you guys, I muted both of you guys just for a second, real quick, because this is going off into that's going down a completely different rabbit hole. Definitely, this is a discussion that I think is probably suited for another stream, which I am very happy to have at some point. However, I wanted to get back to what Lutheran Templar was saying about in response to the 9/11.
What I want to say is like 9/11, we poked our noses in the wrong place, and at some level, the Democrats know that they poked the noses in Middle America too much. They forced. I know how they do this shit. I've said it many times on different streams. It might not be appropriate to say, but like there are many ways you can bypass elections. Big Democrat cities can offset their voter ballots to other areas, and that's why most Democrat cities only have 50-60% majority.
Please
Like,
do that. Please do that. That would
what?
be amazing.
What?
Moving fucking votes from an actual district into another one. Oh, that would be amazing for my side on this. Oh,
No, I mean, like one of the ways they do that is that you hire a bunch of real estate guys to say they're going to develop a project on a plot of land. Maybe it's going to be like 200 units on a plot of empty land. You sell those 200 units to like an NGO or someone else that gives the addresses as a voter. It becomes the address of a voter. Then after the election, oh, sorry, we ran out of money. We're canceling the project. Then those addresses go into La La Land, and those ballots are still valid, even though if you go to the addresses, they're empty lots. I mean.
For sure.
You've probably seen this yourself.
I have seen this myself. That's why I'm saying please change that. Please do that. Oh, it would be great.
I don't know why I
did. It'd be absolutely amazing.
Do what?
Go ahead and do that.
Illustrate. Oh, illustrate. Oh yeah. I mean, this is how they do it.
No. I'm saying I would pray that there would be a group of people that do that. And we have evidence of that.
I mean, it's obvious that they're doing it, but no one's ever gonna do a. I think like the retard, Stephen, who's the conservative guy? Stephen
Crowder.
Stephen Crowder did a series about it, where he visited the addresses. They were empty lots, and they just he got suspended from YouTube for a week, and they never talked about it again. I think someone told him shut the fuck up. But like like the big Democrat heads know what they did. They played this game too much, too hard. It became pretty fucking obvious what they were doing. And then it blew up in their faces again. So I'm like, what are they gonna do? They're gonna the kvetching is a symptom of knowing they're guilty. Like, I mean, they all know that they caused this on themselves. So like, they're trying to like, despite all their bullshit that they go out. I mean, like they kind of brought it on themselves. And just like 9/11, they're just trying to cope and seethe. But there's no one they can bomb. There's no one they can invade. So they just have to deal with this shit. And instead of like, there are ways to deal with this, and they should have done it for the last 2 years, and they didn't. And now 2 years later, the people they shot on are. Some of them were in this house and causing a mess again. And it's like, well, I mean, dudes, I'm sorry. Swallow your fucking pride. Deal with the people that hate you. Talk to them and make arrangements and make a deal. Because you're just going to have this stuff blow up in your faces 2 years from now again.
On that note, I think we should probably move on to our 6-minute intermission. So if you need to go make a cup of tea, go take an Uncle Dumpski, whatever.
I'm leaving.
Take a what?
Uncle
Dumpski.
I'm stealing that one.
Uncle Dumpski. I'll tell you the story behind that. But either way,
I'm leaving.
I don't need the story.
George is divorcing you.
Yeah. I'm leaving. I think Luth Templar can throw cold water on like the revolution heads here. Well, so much better than I can, by the way. So
George, two of you guys are leaving. So is it George and Damnation?
I love you, baby.
I think I'm hitching out too.
Yeah. All right. Just final thoughts from you guys, starting with George.
Yeah, for us, peasants, it's not going to be a big deal. It'll be interesting when this will get in like school textbooks, and maybe some of us have kids. I wonder what school projects they're gonna do in like grade school to commemorate Chudsmas, January 6th. It's gonna be up there with Holocaust education,
Waco,
and
Ruby Ridge,
Civil War, or no, not Ruby Ridge. No, nobody. That was an actual fuck up by the government.
Nobody talks about that one.
Yeah, nobody wants to talk about that. Or Waco,
Texas was a fuck up by the government.
How about the time they bombed? Remember that time they bombed a bunch of blocks in Boston because someone was holding guns?
Yeah,
the guy that shot himself in the back of his head 10 times. That guy.
Yeah. You learn civil rights. You learn the Civil War. You're going to learn the Holocaust, and you're going to learn January 6th.
Orange Man bad.
Yeah, basically that. When we came this close to fascism. Anyways, I'm going to dip out.
The billionaire could have maybe.
All right. Now, final thoughts from Damnation, because I know you have to get out of here too.
So, basically, my final thoughts are: January 6th was a fucking joke. It was a piss poor attempt at an insurrection that failed, and
no, it's called an insurrection because it failed.
No. it's a piss poor attempt at something that failed, and we're gonna when we get it. If there's another chance, an opportunity, yeah, there's a lot more people that had their eyes opened up after that situation. That it might actually light up this time. So, but that's it.
All right. Any plugs you want to give, Damnation?
No,
Or
I'm gonna leave. Have a good night, guys. Peace out.
All right, good night.
I appreciate the
Friday.
stream. Yeah,
Shabbat
happy fucking
shalom.
Friday. I got a beer. I'm gonna drink it.
Go drink your beer.
I got
All right.
whiskey.
You know what? Just like beers in the rain, as a yeah, like beers in the rain. No,
As
anyway, wait,
so
Aiden,
too are
did
my
you say-
drinks on Hot Rocks.
Aiden, are you staying for the second hour or not?
I think I got to
Hour.
head on late. I'm on the East Coast.
Yeah, it's
You
already
are?
11
Okay.
p.m. I'm gonna head out soon too, probably.
Okay, so you know what? We'll skip the intermission then tonight. It doesn't really matter.
Let's just final thoughts and head out. It's 11 p.m. on a Friday.
No, well, we have someone else. We have someone else who's going to dip in for a bit. I'm going to say, like the 2:10 mark. I mean, you're free to leave whenever, but I was thinking we go to the 2 hour 10-minute mark, which is a shorter episode of the Pigpen anyway. But
I want to go play Pavlov video games and enjoy my Friday night.
okay,
VR.
well, hold on a second.
Pavlov video games.
Anyway, so let's move on from January 6th and let's discuss what's going on right now in the House of Representatives, because I think it is honestly incredibly entertaining. I mean, like January 6th levels of entertaining, but in like a different way. It just goes to show just the absolute state of the American legislature and
yes,
just how useless they are. And now you have literally the Democrats saying, in order to help McCarthy win, we are going to create a coalition government with moderate Republicans, which really just goes to show how much Americans fetishize parliamentary systems.
Hold on, did McCarthy lose his 14th vote?
Oh, wait, real quick. I'm gonna head out. By the way.
Okay.
All right. See ya.
Thanks for having me on. It was fun. Good luck with all your stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, he failed again. He failed again. He fucking failed again. 14 votes. 14 votes down, baby.
All right. What were you saying?
Me?
Yeah, you were saying something before.
I'm just okay. I mean, I'm as far as I'm concerned, this is democracy in action. You have a what 20 like pseudo-fascist Republicans who want to get their comeuppance, and so they're gambling their committee positions to push a little bit more, that 10% more that gets them a little bit more power, and praying to good baby Jesus that they don't fuck it up when they get the power, which they will fuck it up because they're fucking clowns, as they always are. So these 20 pseudo-fascist Republicans are going to get a few extra commissions on their committees to do a little bit extra work, fuck it up, and then somehow say that it was the Democrats all along. I just
Republicans are just an embarrassment.
Yeah,
they
they're
are
a
a national
failure.
embarrassment.
I keep saying I hope that this goes on for months. I hope nothing gets done for 2 years if it's possible. Because as far as I'm concerned, the Republicans... No, actually, scratch that entirely. I hope that the Democrats and moderate Republicans elect the Democrat speaker to shame the fuck out of Mitch McConnell, so I never have to hear this fucking F slur ever again. He can go back into his turtle shell or get circumcised. I don't care.
Yeah, like honestly, I think it would be great if Thomas Massey primaried him for senator. I think he could win.
I think Trump should have ran against McConnell instead Tennessee instead of Florida, but whatever.
I don't know why Trump would move to Kentucky.
Tennessee,
I can't see Trump ever moving to Kentucky.
Who cares? Have these people move into the state for the election, then move out once the election's over. It doesn't really matter.
Anyway, we just had two newcomers. Darth Kilhoun, my usual co-host, fashionably late, or more than fashionably late, but he had
gorgeously late.
Well, I have an excuse. So
yes, you do. You very much do.
I mean, as you said, I didn't give you a time frame, but my grandmother is dying. But she just went to sleep for the night. So yeah, that's why I'm free now. So
you want to get some
I haven't. Just
sorry.
to get some thoughts on. I mean, I can't really say that I hate this legislature so far because they did repeal the COVID. Yeah, because they repealed the COVID-19 mandate for the military, and I've been holding out with an exemption for like over a year now in the military. So yeah, I didn't take the shot, and I still remain in the military. I weaseled my way through the system, but so I can't really blame him for that. But I do love seeing the chaos of parliamentary democracy not able to do its procedures because it's a bunch of incompetent morons.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like we're moving closer and closer to like Idiocracy, that movie.
Well, this is just like the late Roman Senate. Like they just split it. They split into two factions, and they literally
the
vote
Optimates
just to
and the
read.
Populares.
No, yeah, the Populares and the Optimates.
Optimates, yeah. I'm an Optimate.
Mhm.
And then, then you also had you also had really rich nobles who basically denounced their nobility and used all of their money to bankroll populist campaigns,
like the Gracchi
So-
brothers.
No, not the Gracchi so much as Publius Pulcher, who is quite literally the Roman Donald Trump, but that is a story for a different time.
Gracchi Senior was Donald Trump. Gracchi
No,
Jr.
Gracchi Senior was more like the Gracchi brothers were like the Kennedy brothers. They were the Kennedy
They were
brothers.
socialists. They were like pseudo socialists.
Well, maybe like more like Bernie, I guess, in terms of policy.
Yeah.
But I'd say, but Pulcher, I'm gonna have to tell you about Pulcher sometime because his story is actually hilarious. But anyway, so we have a newcomer, his first time on here, actually a real life friend of mine, Lax. How are you doing this evening, Lax?
Doing good, Politicrat. It was nice listening to the first hour, and it was nice seeing everyone played for the most part nice together.
You want to go ahead and introduce yourself at least? Just say,
yeah,
what you're about,
yeah, a little, where I stand on things. I am I know I'll get a groan. I'm a Mises Caucus libertarian. Did my part in the Mises takeover and Rothbardian. And I just believe in natural rights and pretty much just letting people do what they will as long as it's not infringing on other people's safety and property.
Libertarian.
Big terms.
You could have just said you're libertarian.
I hate big terms.
It's great to have you on. Finally, Lax. I know we've been talking for about a year. Without having you on. But do you have any insight on the subject, whether it's the January 6th riot or the clusterfuck going on in the House of Representatives right now?
Well, I mean, having the 4chan arm of the Republican Party run into the Capitol was hilarious. And I agree with what a lot of people have said that it was. I forget who was saying. I was listening on the live stream. It wasn't a revolution. It wasn't a coup. It was just some pissy farmers didn't get their way.
That was me.
Yeah. So like, I agree with that. But what I always stand, because I was working at a brewery at that time and had a beer in my hand, watching that happen. I said, "Oh, good." They're reminding the representatives who the hell they work for. So I mean, I like that, but then they started interviewing them, and I was like, "Oh, God." And
never interview a farmer.
Exactly, man. And my point in all of it is our country is something that is basically Rome, and we're declining. Partly, in my belief, that has to do with espionage from China, in my belief, as well as just
internal decadence.
Yeah, no, and I definitely agree with that. What I see is that, and I had mentioned this in the comments, is that American spirit of rebellion has been degraded due to all of the foreign wars.
Yeah.
And that is something that is done on both sides, both left and right, red and blue. And these constant wars have brought us to this point where it's like, we're just fucking tired. We just want to get back to Americans just want to get back to their lives and an equilibrium, if you will. But in today's world, I mean, look at what's going right now with the House, right? It's another battle. And I guarantee in 6 months, there's going to be some other stupid battle that is just shell games. Exactly. But it's going to be the same stuff and nothing's going to change. But it's not until the American people, the population, doesn't matter who you are, the individual, until we get up off our asses and say, no, I'm kind of done with this. Nothing's going to change.
Can I ask you about that? Can I ask you about that more?
Yeah, go ahead, bud.
I agree. I don't know where this came from, because you see that, like, basically around the maybe 1990s, let's say, Americans lost their ability to defend themselves. They just stopped.
Well,
you have Rodney King get beat up and everyone went off on a hissy fit. And after that, like, other than like paid pushed riots from like BLM and people and NGOs, it just doesn't happen anymore. People just like, I don't want to risk it. I don't want to do it. It's like
it's even worse than that. I'd say it's even worse than that, because we've gotten to a point where self-defense is now murder. There are still people complaining about Kyle
Not
Rittenhouse.
in Illinois.
It's so strange when you see people saying he's a murderer. It's like, first of all, no, by legal definition, he's not a murderer because he was found not guilty. But even so, if you watch the video, they were clearly about to kill the kid. Like, they pulled a gun on him. They're beating his head, like him with a skateboard. It's like, it doesn't get more obvious than that. But then they fall back to the excuse, oh, he shouldn't have been there anyway. But it's like, yeah, no, I agree. He probably shouldn't have been there. He was he was dumb for being there. But at the same time, that is irrelevant. That is completely 100% irrelevant to the case.
So I think he should have been there the entire time.
The gun
should have been there,
life.
and he killed him. So that's a win in my book. Every pedo dead is a win.
I mean, to be fair,
like,
I will
randomly
say
it only kills pedos.
It really shows. It really says something about the failure of the American police system, when you have to have 17-year-olds going downtown to protect businesses. Like that is like when that happens, something's wrong.
Kyle,
Net 7, what were you saying? Sorry. Let Net 7, then you can go, Luke Templar.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a failure of the police. I think what it is a failure of the politicians to actually back up the police officers. Because the problem with
everything. It's not. You're right. I don't think we should blame it just on the police.
But yeah, let me finish it.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Because what the reality is that police officers throughout this country, a police institution is controlled essentially by the localities, by the city government, by the state, by the county. And as much as we like to pretend that, or at least like to think that local police officers, are entities that can, move in quickly and stop, whether it's anarchist, violent revolutionaries, or people like the January 6th people. The problem is that unfortunately, the police have become, unfortunately, very constrained by political forces, because the reality is that politicians, pressured by outside political activist groups, largely regressive progressive groups, who seek to dismantle the police's ability to essentially stop, violent left-wingers, and with the hopes of essentially, defunding and then disbanding the police and replacing them with essentially communist groups, militias and stuff like that, like the John Brown Club. The problem is that police are not able to essentially effectively all the time counter these groups, because there is this hanging thing over them, which is the government saying that, look, if we're not gonna defend you guys, we're going to defend those violent anarchists and those violent people attacking you. And, you know, if they do something wrong, then, well, you know, that's just the voice of the unheard. But if you do something wrong, we're going to prosecute you and send you to jail. The reason that police are having such a hard time recruiting is because they've been demonized, they've been attacked, not the people who deserve to be demonized and attacked, which are the violent, you know, anarchists, anarcho-communist revolutionaries. So
I'm not. Hold on.
So I'll finish with this: is that it's not that police are ineffective. Police, when they're allowed to do their job, can stop these sort of violent revolutionaries. It's when, however, the politicians and the political groups who have, and the district attorneys who have more power, unfortunately, ultimately than the police officers, they get constrained and they can't fight back.
I have one point.
Hold on. Let me say something. Let me make my comment first. So I think what's the interesting thing about the police specifically is it is one of those examples of you can't live with them, you can't live without them, because there are genuinely like bad cops. I mean, you to take a look at Derek Chauvin. Like, I think it's pretty clear that at the very least it was manslaughter what he did, or negligence at worst, or negligence at best, murder at worst. That's not the debate we're going to get into, though. But either way, it is clear that there are the police force does attract very sinister people for a variety of reasons. Usually, I mean, there was.
I disagree.
Well, hold on. Let me finish. Let me finish what I was saying. There should definitely be more. They should be more selective with who they choose to be part of the police. They should expand like psychological evaluations. They should prioritize military veterans. I don't think some random goon off the street should be able to just go sign up and a week later he becomes like deputized or whatever. I know that's for sheriffs, but that's just the example I'm giving. But either way, same with like something like qualified immunity, because qualified immunity, police definitely do abuse that. It's like they can get away. They can objectively speaking, the system works in such a way where they are able to get away with certain things that nobody else would be able to get away with. It's like Ezra Miller. Ezra Miller basically has qualified immunity in Hollywood. The cops have qualified immunity with regards to just in like civic life.
So
but the thing is, so like even if a cop breaks into my house without a warrant and like holds a gun at me, so even though I am morally justified to kill that cop, because in the moral sense they are no longer a cop if they come in without a warrant, they're just a home invader. But the law is not going to see it that way. They're going to see me as a cop killer, when in reality I just shot a home invader who's wearing a cop uniform. I guess the same goes with police brutality. There just needs to be certain constraints in place that make it so that they basically forfeit their right to be a police officer if they step outside of their prerogatives and their boundaries. So like we need qualified immunity, but at the same time, these you know what I mean? We need to ensure that they can't get away with as much stuff as they do, and that means we need to put further restrictions on it. So
let me say that, you know, look, there's obviously room for potential reform. Okay, no one's denying that. Okay, does qualified immunity need to be looked at? Yeah, it should be examined, but should we throw it out? But should we get rid of it? No. The same thing with police. You know, same thing with getting, you know, looking at bad cops. You know, like obviously there are bad cops. You know, and if it's in the community's best interest and in the police's best interest to get rid of bad cops, you know. But the problem with what's going on today is that we have the culture has demonized police officers, and police officers, by and large, yeah, some of them can be jerks. I've had jerk police officers before. I've dealt with them before. I've submitted a couple complaints before, but I think the majority of police officers are just doing their job and do it well. I mean, the reality is that who are you going to have? The reality is that yes, we have Second Amendments to protect ourselves, but the reality is that who protects the community at large from the worst elements? It's not individuals, it's the police institutions that suppress and keep the real bad criminals like the pedos, the rapists, the gang members, the drug dealers, either A, in certain areas, or B, force them underground. The reality is that it's the difference between having a safe neighborhood and an unsafe neighborhood, is that when you have community trust in the police and the police are allowed to do their job, you have safe neighborhoods, and when you don't, then you have unsafe ones. That's the difference.
What's really interesting is, like, after the riots, the African American communities, like in the inner cities, it's interesting. Like, among like liberal whites, the police are less popular than they are among urban blacks, who exponentially want increased policing.
But
that's
big
in Harlem.
Politicrat. And you said the word urban. You said the word urban, and this is a very city mindset. Now, where I live, and this is something that I wanted to discuss with Net, is where I live. I live in a place where the cops don't really come around, but every Christmas I have drinks with the sheriff. It's
that's called investing in your community.
Exactly. But we don't have cops up where I live. It's, if you see a cop car up where I live, and I live in a rural area, it's kind of like, oh shit, what are they doing over here? And for what I was saying is, I have my brother was a cop. I have brothers that are cops, and like I said, I drink with the sheriff, and they are decent men. Now, because it's not as populated, the force isn't as populated, there's less of a herd mentality, and that also goes into the unions, the police unions, which I believe unions have a place, but sometimes they overstep their bounds. And
not police unions. Abolish them.
I'm gonna head out. I gotta head out. Sorry.
All right. Want to say any final thoughts, Luke Templar?
I think badge cameras solve most of this shit. That's all I can say about that.
Well, no, just the topic in general, like with the January 6th and the Kevin McCarthy fiasco.
Yeah. I wasn't quite listening because I was trying to lip read. McCarthy lost his vote again and immediately stormed to Gates, and I tried to zoom in to lip read him, and I actually managed to lip read him. He said, Gates, what do you want from me? Say it. He's like basically begging.
Begging a pedophile.
I don't know. I don't believe anything anymore. But I think
he's accused. That's not he hasn't been convicted or charged with the crime.
Yeah, I tend to doubt all claims.
But here's the thing, though.
Wait,
it's like
hold on. Templar's saying his goodbyes.
Apologies. I gotta get out here. But yeah. So my thoughts are McCarthy's probably gonna become speaker. They're gonna make some deal. I don't know what Gates wants. It must be something really touchy. I don't know. I don't care. It looks like McCarthy's basically one vote away, and it's Gates. So Gates is gonna get some power brokerage out of this. Don't care. Other than that, January 6th was kind of pathetic. Don't care. And that's about it. Good night.
Good night.
Night, buddy.
All right, take care.
So
Kilvin, you were about to say something?
Yes, I wanted to mention this. I mean, most police, most military, like these are the two wings of the regime that tends to attract some of the greatest personnel. I mean, I've seen it firsthand being in the military for 3 years so far. Like some of the greatest men are attracted to here, but the problem is like over on top of us, we have this endless like web of bureaucracy above that can bring down the sword of Damocles upon our heads at a moment's notice for the slightest transgression against our own institution. Like, say, I had to ride the Tiger for like a year and a half on a COVID exemption packet. And essentially, I had to stay green and everything else to not give them a reason to start my discharge papers. And then other soldiers who took the shot but are like get red on a lot of other things, they had a lot easier times. And it was very attractive at times. Oh, just get the shot and you can stop you can essentially stop having to deal with this sort of Damocles on your head. Like, this is what the bureaucracy does to all of us down on the ground level in the military and the police. And that's why, like, a lot of especially city police are afraid to act. They're afraid to be men of action. They're afraid to actually do what needs to be done to actually enforce whatever laws that they're being told to enforce. I mean, and some laws are evil that are on our own books, but I won't get into that tangent yet. But it's like this system, it's managerial in its aspect. It doesn't appreciate any types of men of action. It appreciates the bug man who will comply with this bureaucracy, who will go through the managerial chains, who will not do what needs to be done, essentially, because it might look bad on paper for the organization or something in the media light or something, or in the governmental light. But it's something that needs to be done, you know? Like, it just can't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see what you mean.
You're definitely right. And that brings the point of larger governments means more bureaucracy, which means more things by a letter of something instead of circumstantial.
Well, I mean, this gets into like what qualifies a big and small government, and then what qualifies a good and bad government, because I would much rather have a good, like in my terms, good big government than a really crappy small government, because that for a lot of reasons. But I tend not to view things in terms of big, small government, good, bad government most of the time.
So that's like that's definitely a boomer truth way of looking at things.
Yeah, I'm just the more old school reactionary of just power rests in different institutions and places and individuals, and I don't believe in the democratic populist delusion.
No, you just want what is it? Papal supremacy, right?
Spiritually, and the divine right of kings to return. That'd be my utopia.
Speaking of which, yeah, I know Hoppe doesn't believe in the divine right of kings, but he is the closest you could get, I guess, to a reactionary while being a libertarian. And I know, Lax, you mentioned earlier, because you were communicating with me privately, Democracy, the God That Failed, by Hoppe. How do you think that Hoppe's theories that he presented in that pertains to the subject of tonight? Because it seemed like you had something to say about that.
I was when I was talking to you, I was more on democracy itself as a God, our Western country, our Western culture looks at democracy as like this end all be all. But in my opinion, I think that we've moved so far away from the natural rights that were championed through democracy that we've lost almost the use for it now.
I see what you mean. It's like I feel like people, basically the ideals used to be life, liberty, and property, not democracy. So basically, democracy, equality, or democracy, equality, and materialism have usurped life, liberty, and property. Democracy, equality, and materialism were never intended to be ideals. They were intended to be tools or framework through which to advance the ideals of life, liberty, and property, regardless of whether you agree with that or not. Because I know, like Lax, you would agree with that, whereas Calhoun would definitely be opposed to that. But either way, that was the function. That was like the intended function of something like democracy.
Well, the thing that we lost specifically was we have rights, but we also have responsibilities. As we have natural rights, we have natural responsibilities. Honestly, I believe through the socialist indoctrination of our country, is that we have expected to get all the rights without any responsibilities. You buy a house, your house is going to degrade over time unless you're responsible for it and take care of it.
I love democracy. I love.
But by the way, this is a great scene because all democracy also tends towards Bonapartism. Just saying.
So I want to add, and this is something that I did want to say because this goes back to January 6th, 2021, and this was like I said, this is something that I was considering before I even came into the stream. Democracy.
You're cutting out real bad.
What?
You were cutting out real bad.
Oh, do you hear me now?
Yeah, it's better. Yep. I think it's just when you try to play a clip.
Oh, okay. No, so I was saying this is something that I considered coming into the stream, and Lax, you kind of reminded me of this. We need to remember there's this whole meme going around that the left, or it's not even necessarily just the left, it's more so like the shit lib establishment Democrats who say, oh, the right and the Republicans, they hate democracy, they're out to destroy democracy. No, they're not. Here's the thing.
I wish.
No, Democrats fetishize democracy. Listen. The Democrat, and when I say the right, I'm talking about boomer, like Republicans, Trump supporters, those people. But either way, just so hear me out here. The Democrats, of course, they overtly fetishize democracy. They can't say that word enough. They always talk about our democracy, defend our democracy. This is the most important thing, as if it is some sort of ideal, which to them it is. And they talk about how much they care about preserving our democracy, and they vilify the Republicans for trying to allegedly destroy it. However, they don't realize that Republicans fetishize democracy just as much as they do. January 6th, the Boomer Hall Putsch, as I call it, was a fundamentally pro-democratic I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Endeavor, I guess maybe that's the best way to say it. And not because they were right, they were wrong. Like Donald Trump did not win, Donald Trump lost. But they love democracy so much, and they are so committed to democracy that they are willing to attack the Capitol in order to ensure that what they believe, because of course they're wrong, but so quote unquote justice can be done and democracy can prevail. Am I making sense there?
You are.
It was because if they actually opposed democracy, that wouldn't be the precedent of the riot. They might not even have rioted at all. They might have tried to work within the system and try to establish something. Like Trump is the ultimate Trump is probably the most democratic president in American history, and that is because he was the first other than Andrew Jackson, but populism back then was very different than populism now. But Donald Trump was the very first true ultra populist president, even proto Caesarist potentially, in U.S. history. And populism is a denigration of democracy, and democracy is in turn a denigration of republicanism. That goes back to that Aristotle quote: masculine republics devolve into feminine democracies. So,
oh, that doesn't sound like now.
What? No, I was quoting Aristotle.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah, and for some reason we keep on trying this over and over again. It's like Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, let's just introduce republicanism and democracy again and again, and it fails again and again.
It's basically like Lucy from the Peanuts holding the football, and Charlie Brown running to kick the football. Like he knows he's gonna get it this time, but he doesn't.
We're gonna achieve democracy this time, guys. We're gonna have a true republic this time, guys. We're gonna have true communism this time, guys. I love hearing this. Well, then it's like I honestly monarchists are the only people that can say yes, we had it and it was glorious. Well, then everybody's like, no, we never had true democracy or capitalism or communism.
You realize monarchy would not work within the context of the U.S. though, because it is.
I'm joking because every part of the political compass besides for monarchy can actually say it's we actually had it and it was glorious.
Well, political compass is kind of a joke. I've come to realize that over the years.
Well, the test is, but it is like kind of a good
It's fun.
chart though
It is-
to use.
Oh yeah.
But
Anyway, I
I'm
would say
just
we go
saying,
for
like,
another. We're gonna go to 220, and then we're gonna have final thoughts then. But so I guess just as we wrap up this, are there any other major points that you feel like need to be touched on, whether it has to do? Oh, actually, you know what? I completely forgot the January 6th commission. We never talked about that.
You're really cutting out again.
No, I said we never
hear him
talked
fine.
about we never talked about the January 6th commission.
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Did you hear what I just said?
I heard what you said. Yeah, I heard.
Yeah,
it
I
fine.
said no.
Talk
We just
about
haven't talked about the
6th
January
Commission.
6th commission. So the January 6th hearings, I just thought they were boring, so I never really paid attention to them. So maybe I'm not the best person, I guess, to sort of introduce what they're about. Like, did any of you guys follow them particularly closely?
I don't follow them.
I watched the ones with the police officers, and I did watch a few interviews. I can't say them. I followed them religiously, though. I was more interested, to be honest with you, in them setting up a commission to investigate the debacle of what happened with the Afghan pullout.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like for instance, I think we should have gotten out of Afghanistan a long time ago, but the way we went about doing it was absolutely embarrassing, and Biden should have definitely faced more criticism.
Well, he should have been impeached. I mean, the reality is that, I don't think we should have left, but, that's something we can disagree on. But everyone understands is that, the way in which it happened never should have happened. And the reality is that Democrats have covered for Biden, saying that, oh, well, Trump negotiated the deal or whatever, the Doha agreement. But the reality was it happened under the Biden administration, and Democrats just ignore that. The thing about January 6th is that, it gave the Biden administration a great way to deflect from their absolute failure, and then, and then say, hey, look at what happened on January 6th. We're going to create a commission on that. Okay, fine, make your commission, but I still want the commission on the fall of Kabul, and I still want, people should have been fired, just like people who are involved in January 6th, are being prosecuted currently. The reality is that there should be people with regards to the Afghan withdrawal who literally should be losing their jobs, and the fact that no one has been fired or even suspended just kind of shows you the double standards the Democrats play here. The reality is that I think that I agree with, Representative, Don Bacon, who talked about January 6th. He said, what happened that day was awful. It never should have happened. And it was back the blue, defend the blue. But the reality, what happened though on January 6th, though, the rioters were nowhere near close to actually seizing control of the U.S. government. That wasn't going to happen.
And people, actually, with regards to, so there were some who built a gallows and were like chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and you hear there have been people who have said, "Oh, they almost killed the vice president." How close did they actually come to doing that? Because I've heard varying things. Part of me feels like they're being hyperbolic, but at the same time,
they're sort of being hyperbolic. But the reality, but they are correct. Because the vice president was secure, but they are correct in this: is that if the crowd had gotten their hands on Vice President Biden. Vice President Pence at the time, they might have, they probably would. Some of the members of that crowd would have tried to kill him. And so the reality is that, these people were, violent, rioters who had some of them who had homicide in their mind. And that's why I agree with Lindsey Graham. When he talked about, like when he was reported as saying to some of the police officers, why aren't you shooting these guys? Because the reality is that, people like Ashley Babbitt, for example, people complain about her, but the reality is that she literally had all the chances in the world not to get shot and chose to get shot. Literally assault police officers, break into the Capitol, and literally at this last stop door, literally there's like, don't go in, but no, she decides to force her way in, break the window, try to get into there, and then she gets shot because at that point it's like you literally are just one step away from getting to, you know, members of the House of Representatives. No.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
Yes, exactly. You know, it's like, it's the reality. The reality is that when it came to the George Floyd riots, you know, across this country, there were legitimate times, you know, where the police should have probably had shot at some of these violent people, you know, causing harm and mayhem and even death to people. And in the same case of January 6th, there were times where Ashley Babbitt was justly shot, you know, and there probably should have been because she tried to essentially break into an area to get access to the members of the House of Representatives with the potential to kill them. You know, maybe she wasn't trying to kill them, but there were certainly people in that crowd that wanted to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to outright say that the cops were right for shooting her, but it's completely I think it's understandable that they did, and I'm not surprised, and I'm not going to mourn her because she should have known better. So
yeah, I'm not surprised, and I'm not gonna I'm gonna back the blue on that one. I'm gonna say that they were completely justified in doing it. You know, the reality is, because again, it's like this. It's like you had all the chances to avoid getting shot, and you chose to get shot. You know, it's just like many of these, you know, rioters, you know, across the country in which, you know, they had opportunities, you know, to get away, and then the police fired tear gas and pepper balls because, you know, you throw enough Molotov cocktails, you know, the police are just, what are they supposed to do? Just stand there? No. And the same thing with Ashley Babbitt. It's like when these police officers are tasked with protecting members of Congress, you know, what are they supposed to do? Just let you break into there and potentially kill one of the people they're responsible for protecting?
Yeah.
So
that does make sense.
Yeah, it's the same case with the rioters. It's the same case with the rioters in Washington D.C. who, you know, remember before Trump went to the church and, you know, had the photo taken at that one historical site. Those rioters, you know, were literally throwing like bricks at the police, like literally taking pieces of the earth and to literally attack the police with. And they had been violent for days. And so finally the police say, we're having enough, we're clearing the streets, we're getting rid of these guys, and we're moving them back. And then people complain, oh my gosh, how dare the police do this? They didn't give warnings. One, the police did give several warnings before they did that. Two, the Washington, D.C. police who were moving those people out, they had literally dozens of officers who had suffered all sorts of injuries like concussions, even up to like broken arms. And now they're trying to stop these people from committing more violence. What are you supposed to do as a police officer? Just stand there and let it happen? No, people need to understand that, you know, in the case of the violent George Floyd rioters, you know, these anarchists and these anarcho-communists and Stalinists, and in the case of the people like, you know, Ashley Babbitt, you know, the police are not just there to exist. They have a responsibility to protect the public and then ensure and do their job. And I'm sorry, but sometimes that requires using harsh force and even deadly force.
But there is something
Lax,
to
as the ANCAP here, Lax, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. Well, I don't believe that democracy is the end all be all. And Nat, when you were saying about like they have a right to protect their people, all I think about is why was one group armed and one group not? Every American should be armed. And Jared, and that would have made it a lot uglier and made that would be definitely a different conversation than that we have now. But with the police, not nationalized, what's what I'm looking for. It's not a private police force, which would just be protecting. the people would have had if they had their own private security force, just like the politicians do, they'd be meeting on. And I think, and I believe with two forces, then they might actually have a conversation instead of one group, because they're armed, just looking at the unarmed group saying, oh, well, we can win this. Well, if other people were armed, then they say, well, we can't do is let's negotiate.
No, the reality is that if you're not unarmed when, let's look at the case of the George Floyd rioters in Washington D.C. when you literally use instruments to literally pull out bricks from the street or from areas and literally throw them at the police with the intent of causing concussion. You're not unarmed when you're a January 6th rioter and you've got a flagpole and you're literally banging it on the head of a police officer trying to cause a concussion. All those people, the police, when you're trying to do that, you're not unarmed, and the police in both cases gave far too much leverage to the rioters. The reality is that there are so many police officers, throughout the country, throughout the George Floyd riots and through January 6th, who got unnecessary injuries and concussions. Some of them will never be the same physically, because they gave far too many chances to these violent rioters because of what politicians have done to essentially demonize and neuter the police officer's ability to respond to these people. And so the reality is that no, the state is responsible for the protection of the public in terms of defending law and order. And when there's people out there, who have a First Amendment right to express themselves, decide to then use violence as a means to gain supremacy and control, then the police have to respond. And if those people don't disperse, then the police have to respond with force, and so when these people then attack the institutions with weapons, whether they're improvised or whatever, they're not unarmed.
But they are outgunned, and my point is, meeting at level ground can create a discourse instead. Shaking your head, that's okay, man. I believe that if the one thing that the January 6th completely disorganized. No leader, no somebody to speak for the mob. And there was also no one on the Hill that went out to speak. My problem is if there's no discourse on level ground, then all it does is fuel the fire. And that's what that's all I advocate is for discourse. And let's say it's utopia, right? How would things be different? Well, having somebody to, be the representative for the party, for the Hill, and then having a representative for the thing, and not in it's like whoever they say, it's like, you go say, this is what we want. And then that discourse could have saved lives.
I think this goes back to, I think this is a ridiculous assumption, because it goes back to the idea that the same argument that was used by the people who were apologists for the communists, anarchists, anarcho-communist, Stalinists, violent rioters in the George Floyd riots, who literally said, no, these people have an argument. We have to listen to them. These people did not have grievances. These people were essentially trying to violently overthrow the state in some areas, or violently wage war against the state. So this was essentially a mini war, if you will, against the state. And the burning of police stations, the burning of government buildings, the burning of public property, the assault of police officers, the assault of private citizens, even the deaths of some people, are indicative of that. It's the same thing with some of the people at January 6th. These people were not interested in a conversation. They were interested in venting out their rage and frustration to the fact that they had lost an election and the result was not what they wanted. So the reality, it's the same thing. It's the same mode that goes on. I source it back to the libertarian infiltration within the Republican Party. Is that
there has not been a libertarian infiltration of the Republican Party?
Of course, of course,
that is a very I like you, Net 7, but I think that is probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard you say.
No, I'm correct on this. The left.
How are you correct? What libertarian policies does the Republican Party support, other than maybe like lower taxes?
The isolationism is one of them. The softening of drug policies.
I don't know a single libertarian isolationist. I don't know a single libertarian isolationist.
Libertarians are totally isolationist, and
they're
again,
non-interventionist, but they believe
no, they are totally isolationist. Non-interventionist, isolationist is the same exact thing.
No, they're two totally different things.
Absolutely not.
No,
they're the same thing. And the reality is that, and the reality is what happened in January 6th. What happened in January 6th was again a part of the problem with allowing the libertarians to have a conversation in the conservative movement, which has brought in ridiculous ideas such as, a disregard for law and order, a disregard for the institutions that make our republic. And again, the reality is that the Republican Party is a party of law and order. So when you have George Floyd rioters, on the left burning down cities, their police have to go in and respond and do their job and stop these people. In the same case of January 6th, when you have violent rioters, the police have to go in and do their job and stop those people.
It's like, look, I understand your criticisms of libertarianism. That's completely valid. Every ideology should be subject to criticism. However, I in no way do I see the correlation. Like, I don't know how you can correlate libertarianism as being responsible for January 6th when it wasn't even a libertarian. It was not a libertarian not movement. That's the best word. They weren't libertarians at the January 6th riot. Those were Trump supporters.
They would not define themselves as libertarians, but these people have the paleo libertarian mindset, which is that we don't care about the government. We don't care about the institutions. We care about our, so-called liberties and our so-called rights. And, and we'll just take them. And we'll just do it the way we want and screw the government. It's the same sort of mentality, which says, I don't recognize the government. I don't recognize the police or the institutions. It's just me, and that's it. And so the reality is that that toxic mentality infected the populace on the right, because those people found a potential recruiting element to say that, hey, that this is again our rights being violated by a government which is overstepping its bounds. Of course that wasn't true, but the reality is that they found a perfect recruiting ground for that, and that's why they need to be purged from the Republican Party.
I see what you're saying. I basically see what you're saying. Okay, that makes sense. Because I definitely do think that they're like not necessarily just libertarians. I'd say more paleo conservatives were more of an influence on the sort of Trump people, but there is of course overlap, especially on foreign policy. But I do see what you mean. Like they did, though, like libertarians and more to a greater extent, paleo conservatives were responsible, I guess, for trying to mainstream like non-interventionist foreign policy into mainstream Republican politics. So I see exactly. I agree with you from an analytical perspective, but from whether or not it's good or bad, that's where I disagree with you. But Lax, you had something to say in response to Net 7?
Well, no, I do agree with you. Well, I do agree that the libertarians do have a sense, and it's a kind of autistic sense in a sense of like looking out for yourself. It's something that we've always dealt with, at one extent or another. And the fact that I'm saying we as a libertarian is ironic. But
you need to learn to start saying we. I have. Yes, collectives are very real things.
Yeah, I know. Just joking around. I disagree that looking at libertarians as an infestation of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has been just as bad as the Democrat Party on spending. And as we look at our national debt right now, that has been rising and rising to astronomical numbers, there are people, not just libertarians, there are people, Democrats, centrists, Republicans, that are looking at that debt and going, something needs to change. And what you're looking at right now at the House, in the House, is the Freedom Caucus that Justin Amash co-founded. Then I saw, ironically, someone voted for Justin Amash. Did I read that right?
No, yeah, because you can be Speaker of the House without being in Congress, and I feel like that's actually how it should be. But
yeah, I don't disagree with that. But something needs to be done besides making $1.2 trillion omnibus bills. And that's what the reaction that you're seeing is, that people are sick and tired of spending all this money for foreign nations in a war that, because the only reason it involves us is because of our NATO ties. And I'm a firm believer of bringing back the Monroe Doctrine. Is if it's in Europe, it doesn't involve us unless somebody has attacked America or our allies over here. Then that's on y'all.
Well, I'm going to have to vehemently disagree with you on that point. The reality is that, this is getting off the topic, but, the reality is that isolationism doesn't work. Non-interventionism doesn't work. Reality is that everyone likes to hearken and say, oh, Europe is for Europeans and America has no place in that. The reality is we tried that twice. It didn't work out. And
No, continue. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Because the reality is that, people like to go back in history, and, this is again what I talk about, the unfortunate libertarian influence that's penetrated the Republican Party, is that these ideas of non-interventionism, aka isolationism, and a relaxing of perspectives when it comes to pornography and drugs and stuff like that. All that comes from libertarians infiltrating the Republican Party, and that has to stop. That's why I'm a paleo neoconservative, on the level of Douglas Murray and Norman Podhoretz, because the reality is that I'm sick of and tired of seeing, Ron Paul, or AKA Wrong Paul, style, politics, becoming
still better than Rand Paul,
becoming more mainstream in the GOP, and that, again, the isolationist trends are one extension of that.
But we can't control
So I see what you're saying. However, I think the problem with what you're saying is you're being very generalistic when you say libertarian, because you're saying like libertarian as like a catch-all term to refer to like as if all libertarians believe in this is libertarianism, when libertarianism at its core is defined, it's just based upon voluntary voluntary interaction and private property. That is the
Peak
core of it.
English
You have
liberalism.
thus you have these other things that come about of it, but we need to remember, like, just because somebody's a libertarian, that does not make them a hedonist. Yes, there are a lot of hedonist libertarians. There are a lot of like people who believe that like every man is an island, that no consequences, libertines. That's the best way to put them. You'll have people who go out and they'll just like destroy brain cells by getting high every day, and they'll go and I don't know, they'll just be coomers, and they'll, I don't know, jerk off to like Lisa Ann videos on Pornhub.com. Just all that, like, you know what I mean? Just like libertine losers. But that's not all libertarians, because you have some, like, for instance, like, I don't know, for instance, like me, I accept personal responsibility. Like, I'm basically a libertarian. I take responsibility for my actions. I understand that there's a time for work and pleasure. I'm very anti-pornography. I don't necessarily think we should ban it, but we should definitely put legal restrictions on it, especially with children having access, like children accessing it. Most certainly, I think they should raise the age for those who they should raise the cannabis age to 25, because it's dangerous for developing brains. But that doesn't mean like I want to necessarily make these things illegal, but I'm not necessarily endorsing these behaviors either. I think that is the different, like, that's really the real difference there. And again, like, I wouldn't even necessarily say I am a non-interventionist, because that implies never intervening no matter what. Because you know what? Like, let's say China starts, let's say they somehow manage to install like a puppet president of Mexico or something, and then they start to mobilize, they start to build bases there, and then they start to like move, like they start to like engage in these like shady little movements of, I don't know, maybe like nukes or I don't know, something like that. Like, at that point, it is obvious what China's trying to do. It's subterfuge. They're trying to impede upon our sphere of influence. And the libertarians that really piss me off are like, oh, but they haven't attacked us, we shouldn't invade Mexico in this case. It's like, no, that would call for invading Mexico, because that would actually save lives. What are we just going to do? Are we just going to wait for them to nuke like Austin, Texas or something? I don't know why I said Austin, Texas, but are we just going to wait for them to nuke us and sacrifice the death of like several million people before we go to war against them? No, it's just it's stupid.
Bloodcrat, I think one thing is that a lot of at least little L libertarian is that I know that I can't control what other people do. I mean, I don't agree with shooting up heroin, but if somebody wants to do that, all right, go ahead, do it. It's not, I don't care. That's your thing. Now you start stealing my property. Now you start, coming on my property or threatening my family. Well, that's a different story. I have a right to defend myself. But looking at, I can't control other people, and that's at the heart of what it is if I can't control them, people should, no one should try to control anyone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I disagree with this idea of libertarianism as, it's just about it's a personal choice and stuff. Like, I'm a former libertarian myself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was, as a former libertarian, I believed in that, this idea of, I would not have been a hedonist myself. I mean, I was Christian, libertarian, so like, I was like, well, I don't believe in these things, but if people do that, that's their own choices, but the reality is that what have we seen from the libertarian influence that which is essentially a leftist movement, and I don't agree that it's conservative, really.
Here's where Kilhoun would really agree with you. That's funny. This is what Kilhoun says all the time.
Oh, yeah. I would have the full Anzian regime if if you let me.
He's always talking about how libertarianism is left wing.
Yeah, I'll also let you guys get your libertarianism fetish out before I make my points.
Yeah, because if you think about libertarianism, I mean, look, it's like they're essentially just liberals who want to have their guns and don't want to get taxed. It's like, I'm okay with you. Like, they have essentially the social policies of progressives, but the fiscal policy of conservatives. It's like, I don't understand. So I just don't get it. Because the reality is that, we talk about, what pornography's influence on American society is, or on just society in general. It's bad. Okay. It's not good for people. And when you talk to libertarians and you say, okay, fine, but can we at least have some rules about pornography access? And then they say, oh no, that's like what the Chinese Communist Party do. Oh no, that's authoritarian. It's like, but okay, well, can't we have some checks to make sure that, hey, if you're like some ID verification, in which, okay, you verify your ID and it says, okay, depending on your state, 18 or 21, you can't access this certain website. Oh no, you're doing what the Stasi did. Oh no, you're doing what the CCP did. And it's like, but I have to take my ID if I want to go to the gas station. Like I want to go to Circle K and I want to grab myself like some beer. Oh, well, like that's different. It's like, no, it's like, and then you have some crazies even saying, oh, we don't even need driver's licenses. It's like,
oh yeah, that's stupid. Like,
it's at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense. It's like when you try to talk to like, and this is why I eventually left libertarianism. I become one of its greatest critics because I was a part of it and I kept hearing the arguments. And over time, I just said, it doesn't make sense. Like, I mean, there have to be some checks. And I kept hearing people saying, oh, no, we can't have checks at all whatsoever. And finally, I just became disillusioned with it because it just said, if we're just going to literally say that in no circumstance are we going to intervene, even in the case of genocide, and there's no case in which the state should have some rules, like even minimal rules, like just minimalist stuff that might help, protect kids from seriously disgusting stuff that will cause problems for them, then it's just like, no, it's not an ideology that can stand.
Minarchists agree with you in that.
I mean, I'd say I don't know a single libertarian. I can't think of any libertarian, at least someone who I'm aware of, who is against, who is against age verification for pornography, because they believe that pornography should be legal, but again, for adults. The only people I'm seeing who say, oh no, we shouldn't put these age restrictions on, the only people I see that are like woke progressive types. Those are the only people I say who are like criticizing this bill in Louisiana that was just introduced. And it's like, and I think that's kind of suspect, because it's like, okay, wait, so basically by saying that, you are essentially saying you're fine with 11-year-olds poisoning their brain by watching pornography. And I will say, I think Kyle Kulinski has a lot of terrible takes, but I think his worst take is the one when he said it multiple times. He says pornography is good and healthy and a positive thing in society. Like, how? Like, it's just so cringe. Like, how can you even think that, especially when there are so many studies that are done? People who watch pornography are also more likely to be wife beaters. Like,
yeah, Kremlin
Kyle, that's why feminists oppose
idiot.
Porn, and the feminists are right on that front.
Yeah, that's why I quit. That's why I struggled with that, in my life, and I quit it, because the reality, because that stuff has no benefits whatsoever to people. It degrades it. It not only makes you feel like an awful human being, it ruins you, and it ruins people's abilities. Not for myself, because I grew up in a household where you respected women, and that was it, and if I didn't respect my mom, my dad would give me the hand. But a lot of other teenagers grow up with this stuff, this abhorrent content, and they don't grow up in households where they're told to respect women, because they don't either have a dad present, or the mom and dad are just very apathetic to their growing up with the kids. And so then these guys end up seeing women as nothing more than either A, women just to be bedded down and they don't care what happens, consequences, or B, they become toxically abusive because they don't respect women at all, because they've never been taught it, and the content that they viewed since they were kids has taught them to see women as nothing more than sexual objects to be demeaned.
Net,
and I say,
I have a question.
Hold on, you can ask it a second. I just want to add on to what Net 7 was saying there. It was like back when I was in my teenage porn watching Coomer day, my teenage Coomer days. There was nothing like, let's say you're watching a pornographic video. There was nothing that just was like more of a turnoff than when like the lady says, "Oh yeah," like it was like that casting couch thing. It's, "Oh yeah, I've always wanted to do porn. I love it." And it's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You have daddy issues, and it's sad. You grew up in a very sad life, and you're probably going to live a very sad life. And it's just depressing. It's just depressing to think about. Like, that is nobody's first choice of career. Like, and it's because modern society is of course, we see how it's failed men, but I think it's failed women too. So anyway, Lax.
Oh no, Calhoun, you said something?
No, I'm just saying if you guys are done with the libertarianism, I was just going to give my thoughts on the Jan 6 committee.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm guessing we all studied the French Revolution at some point in our lives. Yeah, have we all? Because I'm about to like say some stuff that some people might not know about. But I essentially see like this Jan 6 committee as like the Committee of Public Safety in the French Revolution, where essentially these are liberals fighting amongst each other on who can be the most pure liberal. It's like it was mostly the Democrats liberal faction, because I don't see America having any right wing parties. I view every party in America as left wing. Because there's no, like, I could pretty much see right wing as like the French Revolution definition of you being a monarchist as right wing. But it was essentially like first they purged the monarchists from the National Assembly with the Committee of Public Safety. Then they went after like the moderate liberals. Then they went after like the centrist liberals, and then finally they just started purging like the Jacobins, like the radical left liberals in France, and they just kept on purity spiraling until it actually killed the main founder of the Committee of Public Safety, Maximilien Robespierre, by his own guillotines, and that was like the Reign of Terror. So I kind of see this like the clunky American version, like the very Reign of Terror and the Committee of Public Safety being the Jan 6 Council or committee or whatever it's called.
I don't know. I'd go even further. I actually feel like the January 6th commission, it would be more honest and based if they just called it the January 6th Inquisition, because it is an inquisition.
Well, because it's Republican, they have to call it a committee. If it was a based monarchy, then they could call it an inquisition.
Well, no, I mean they can legal like I think the reason they don't want to use the term inquisition is optics. But like the United States has formed committees before in Congress that have been called inquisitions. And I don't know, maybe I just love those old-fashioned terms like inquisition and you know what I mean.
Well, I wish we could also like return to form and actually like use these words again, like inquisition and stuff, but I wouldn't want like the American state running the Inquisition. I'd like actually want a moral institution to do it. If we did form an Inquisition.
No, but nobody expects the January 6th Inquisition.
Yep. Well,
Lax had something to say, I think.
No, I'm about to hop off because I got an.
Yeah, I think we should actually wrap up here. Does anybody have anything else to say?
Well, I would not call it an inquisition. I would call it an investigation into what happened and how it transpired, because the reality
is, of inquisition.
Well, maybe this is a difference between the colloquial version, you know, what this word itself, you know, gives off versus necessarily what it actually means. But again, a lot of police officers on January 6th were severely injured, you know, brutalized. You know, the rioters broke into and gained access to the Capitol. People were chanting "Hang Mike Pence," and so there was real concern that members of Congress, members of the Senate, and even members of the executive branch would come to harm if these rioters got a hold of them. And so, if you think about that, there has to. I agreed. Like Representative John J. Bacon did, who's a moderate in the Republican Party, said, "Yeah, we need to have a committee It's okay to have a committee to investigate this." I think the Democrats went about it the wrong way, though, because they didn't really want to include Republicans. They didn't make a committee with like equal Republican, equal Democrat power, like 6 members of the Republicans, 6 members of the Democrats. They really wanted it set on their own terms. They eventually they kind of gave off this idea of, we're being nonpartisan because we have Kinzinger and we have Liz Cheney. But the reality is that the Democrats, I believe, intentionally tried to shut out other Republicans who obviously condemned the violence, but didn't necessarily, but obviously were not necessarily Republicans who are going to say that Trump was responsible for that, because Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, and I respect them both, obviously they believe, for reasons that they hold, and I'm not going to disparage them, that Trump was the instigator of January 6th. There were other Republicans who would have said that, Trump was not responsible. And
I think it was Giuliani.
Yeah. And so I think that the reality is that they think the Democrats, unfortunately didn't, want to have a more bipartisan January 6th committee. But am I going to say that the January 6th committee was, bad? No, I'm just going to say that it should have been done better to make it more bipartisan.
All right. So I guess on that note, is everyone ready to move on to final thoughts?
Yep.
All right, we'll let Net 7 go first. So just state your final thoughts regarding the topics that we discussed this evening, or any other any footnotes you have, how you feel like what we'll see going forward. I don't know, just the usual. What we're about on here.
Well, I just want to say thank you to all the police officers at January 6th who did defend the Capitol, and were doing their job, and were, unfortunately assaulted and brutalized. It's a terrible tragedy that occurred. Obviously, I'm glad that, many of the perpetrators are being sought out, and that some have had criminal charges referred, and that some of them are going to prison, which is a good thing. I disagree with the assumption, though, that there was that the government was literally going to be toppled. I think that's those images of the military, some sort of like coup occurring, is this. I think that's a bit far stretched, and I don't think that was seriously going to happen, even if the riot, whatever was going to happen. I do believe that what we need right now is that. With regards looking back on the Capitol riots, obviously, it's unfortunate that, some elements in the right have been hijacked, by these, these ideas of attacking the police and institutions, that were essentially an element of the left. The left during the George Floyd riots did that for. Literally attacked the state, attacked police officers, assaulted random people, even, so there were even some casualties. Obviously, January 6th, though, is not as bad as 9/11. 9/11 resulted in the deaths of hundreds of people. That was something totally different. There's still but obviously, that's just my thoughts on that, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, thank you, Net 7. Now let's go on to Lax. Final thoughts.
I think that the January 6th entire law brigade going in was idiotic, and I think that the January 6th commission is just as idiotic and a waste of taxpayer money. and all it is more posturing, or what's the word? Playing to the base of of really just more statist ideology, and yeah, that's about it. Waste of fucking time.
All right, and finally, Darth Kilhoun. Final thoughts.
So my final thoughts. I don't really have many final thoughts besides it was a group of liberals attacking a liberal institution because they were insufficiently liberal. That's my thoughts on it.
All right. On that note, thank you everybody for coming on, and that goes for those who have already left us. The original panel. But yes, thank you for coming on. Net7, Lax, Darth Kilhoun. Thank you to all of our viewers. We just hit 800 subscribers finally yesterday. So I know it's really not many in the greater scheme of things, but that's still more than like 90% of YouTube channels. So that's good. Let's hopefully 1,000 is on its way. But other than that, good night, everybody. Be sure to tune in next Saturday for our episode on imperialism and debating over whether or not America is an empire. We'll be having Stephen Michael Davis on. We'll be having Paul Fahrenheit on. We'll be having, of course, Kilhoun on. Maybe Net7. But I wanted to have Kevin Castley come on too because he blocked me for saying America was an empire. I just think that would be really interesting to have him on. Plus, he's kind of a lol cow. So, but either way, thank you everybody for the third time, and good night.